Oh,
No?
come
They
on,
gotta pay.
Guubums.
They gotta
Hello,
pay.
everybody. Welcome back
Bump
for
him down, bump him
another. Guys, I'm introing. Please keep it together. Episode just began. Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Don't Talk If You Don't Know, the TFT podcast dedicated to analyzing, scrutinizing, and basically just jibber jabbering until Bryce has to go because he has a baby, where we talk about all things high-level teamfight tactics, particularly especially in North America. I am your host, Frodan. It's a little bit of a different camera angle this time. I'm trying to play around with some new tech. Join with me always is my co-host, Bryce Blum. Bryce, how was your past week? It feels like it's been kind of boring over in the Blumland.
Yeah, it's been super boring. I've had a really boring, uneventful day. Nothing of note I have been dealing with. Life is great. Social media is great. I am genuinely excited to be here, though. I've been looking forward to this all week, and I will not let today spoil it. I'm super hyped for this episode. I'm so happy to have Ramblinnn Guubums here.
That's right. We have two special guests to close out the final rankings episodes, which we'll explain in a little bit. Let's check in with our guests first with Ramblinnn. Ramblinnn, how you doing, man?
I am doing my best. I'm happy to be here, though.
That's good. It's good. I feel like you've been, still playing a little bit of TFT, doing some coaching, also sprinkling some other games. How's like the off season been for you? Do you feel restless like a lot of other TFT players?
Yeah, I think I'm always restless. So it's the thing. When it comes to TFT, I'm never playing the game, so I'm always looking forward to the next event, I guess. But we got a little bit of time now to chill out and relax. But you got to keep a little TFT in the mix just to keep people interested.
Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and check in with Guubums. Now, Guubums, your week had a lot of highs and a couple of lows as well. Why don't you talk a little bit about the past, month for you, because that's the last time we did this episode.
Yeah, well, after regional, because we had, for some reason, a huge break between regionals and worlds. So after regionals, I was just streaming a lot, I guess, and then doing a lot of in-houses. It was playing a lot of TFT, I guess, and then after worlds, interestingly enough, I was not all that burned out. I was not nearly as much as I thought I would be. So I've just, even after Worlds, I've been playing a solid amount pretty much every day. And I'm excited to do the episode.
That's great.
Loves
great.
TFT.
I mean, most people aren't even touching TFT. They're trying to find every other excuse to not play TFT on stream. I've seen people queue up League of Legends Summoner's Rift intentionally with their friends. It's like they don't even want to suffer by themselves. They want to bring some of their closest human beings and loved ones into the suffering. And that's really, really sad to see. So hopefully Set 7 comes out very soon, because
everyone who queues up with Guubums for regular League immediately regrets it. You can see 5 minutes and they're like, oh my god, wait, what did I sign up for? And if you missed the game where Guubums queued randomly and it was Trick UG on a Smurf.
Yes.
Guubums, it is one of my favorite 30 minutes of content in a really long time, because Trick is flaming them, and then people start to inform him. I go in his chat, I'm a mod in his chat, I'm letting him know that who he's playing with, and he's like, oh my god, it's these guys, and it was just, oh my god.
Yeah, you see Milk Guy and you see Guubums. It was just really, really funny. And he was like, guys, don't queue up! TFT players are queuing!
Yeah.
It was just warning everybody not to queue up in solo queue. It's really, really funny. All right, well, enough. This is not a League of Legends podcast. It's a TFT podcast. Let's jump into the action, shall we, in just a moment here. So we got our intros done, but we also want to look back at what has happened in the previous episode. And so we'll start from the very, very beginning as I pull things up here. So the first thing we want to talk about is regionals, of course. Regionals was an event that I think everybody looked forward to the most from North America, and the most amount of preparation, the most amount of sweat. Yes, I will fix Bryce's cam in just a second here. So Bryce, please lead this segment as I do that.
Wait, what do I have to do? I have to leave and come back?
Just talk about regionals and lead Ramblinnn and Guubums conversation. That's what the host does.
Oh, okay. I would love to do that. So, regionals. I think there's a really interesting dynamic here between the two of you, because I think many people thought that you were either the two most prepared players going to regionals, or two of the top 3. Obviously, it worked out well for Guubums, and it worked out less well for Ramblinnn. He was so close. And I'm curious how you guys think about, everyone always says when you put the best players in the same tournament, it's all variance. I've never really felt like that. I'm curious how much you felt like variance entered into the equation. How variance resistant were you at regionals? Obviously, knowing that it was possible to get more done.
I mean, I can go first. I did not exactly have the best final day. I mean, I had a good final day, but I had 2 ace, and it's exactly the same way that I missed going to Worlds in set 4. So that was lots of fun. Right, throwback there. Also losing out by 1 point to DQA again.
I forgot about the dynamic. Actually, we didn't bring it up on the cast. That was a miss from us, Bryce. The fact that DQA robbed Ramblinnn of a spot again.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Yeah. Although in fairness, we didn't cast Game 6, which is when that would have really been like the storyline, right?
That's true. That's true. Which is another topic in itself, casting order. We can talk about some other time. So Ramblinnn, just I guess a follow up as that. What was going through your mind during that time? Are you just kind of like, okay, whatever, it's happened again? Were you actually fired up and just like I can't believe it? Like, what was going through your mind during that moment?
I mean, I knew it. I didn't do the math beforehand, but I knew it was over as soon as he FF'd, and it didn't end up mattering. I was like, yeah, I kind of figured this was gonna happen. So I played the rest of the game out to my best. I never want to quit early or give up, even if I am nowhere close to qualifying, and that mindset, sticking with it allowed me to even get into the LCQ. So I'm glad I at least was strong about that. Was able to get the first and close it out strong.
Yeah, we'll talk about SCQ in a little bit, but let's also talk about Guubums' North American regional run. I mean, the first 2 days, Guubums, you looked untouchable. You played, I think, 10 different comps in 12 games. It was extremely impressive. You were playing, like, double trouble Kazakhs, like playing 2 Kazakh 2 carries, fully enemized. It was weird stuff, man, going on. Is this what kind of led to it? You said that it was the best TFT you've ever been playing.
Yeah, okay, so like pretty much a week before regionals, I was playing, and I was pretty confident that I was just gonna do the same thing as I did last set, which was just bomb out, because I thought I was like really, really bad. But over the course of the week, like I managed to kind of just like collect ideas from a lot of different players, and I guess like by the end of it, I kind of like knew what was strong. So yeah, during regionals, like I wasn't really tunneled on any other comp, and I think like when I'm really playing well in general, I tend to be able to play like a lot of different stuff. I've noticed that even in the tournaments that I've done well in the past, like I'll like just first time shit. Like I'll just like I think in Zon Cup, which is another one I did really well in, like I just first time like Heimerdinger 3. And like it's not like a Heimerdinger 3 was like a novel idea at the time. It's just like, but having like pretty much for me, it's like if I have the confidence to like try something that I've never really played before, but even though I know it's good, then I think I'm gonna have a good turn.
I'm curious, how did you handicap your own chances going in? Because you did steadily, like as the week went on, because you and I talk basically every day. You went from I'm going 9th to I'm okay. Oh, I might be actually kind of good to like the day before, or maybe even was day of. You're like, okay, I'm actually low key kind of cracked. What percentage chance did you give yourself of making Worlds going in?
Going in, I really just wanted to make final day. Like I think there's always like, okay, so what is it? Is it 3 people or 4 people go to Worlds?
It was 3 guaranteed, right?
3 guaranteed, and then there's 1 spot that was the average highest placement. I'll pull it up again for you.
Okay, so let's say it's like roughly 1 in 8, like 4 and 32, so 1 in 8. I think like, so that gets like a 12.5% for everyone to go. I'd probably like no higher than 10 to go.
Okay.
But I think like after the first day, that's when like, okay, so going into the event, I wouldn't put myself like top 5. I think I had myself hovering like the 5 or 7, like 5 to 7 mark. And then after the first day, I was really, really confident. And then also after the first day, you get to like watch everybody else's VODs. So like, I watch people's VODs. Obviously, I watch people do well, do poorly. And then obviously the people doing poorly makes me a lot more confident. And the people doing well, we just have to see, I guess.
By the way, you slip in the, obviously you can watch other people's VODs, but you deleted yours.
Oh yeah, I deleted mine. But that's because I thought like I played like cool stuff that like I don't think other people were playing. So like, I thought like keeping that hidden was probably better. That being said, I got like 2 Synatic games on the first one, and I kind of like did well, like really well in the Synatic games. Because I don't know if people like chat remembers, but at regional, Synatic was a menace. Like, yeah.
Yes,
there's like 4 people per lobby. Yeah.
It happened to EU where they got like 4 games in a row of Synatic.
Yeah.
It was just absolute trash to play and watch. It was not great. But I mean, everyone already talked about that extensively in the EU scene, so we don't need to harp on that. I want to ask one other just general macro question before we move on to the LCQ. Ramblinnn, this actually is going to go to you first. Do you feel like if it was played in set 6 versus 6.5, because it seems like we have this trend where the 0.5 sets is where it really matters the most, do you think that would have worked out better for you, or do you think it doesn't really matter?
I don't think there's much of a difference for me, honestly. I think the only difference is that I didn't play 6.5 as much as I probably should have. And when I say I didn't play enough, I don't say that I'm underprepared compared to other players. I think I wasn't prepared as I could be personally. And for set 6 and 6.5, both sets, I wouldn't call it a strategy, but the way that I just approach the game and the way I learn and improve is by observing other players more than myself. And the problem with that is there's so much variance in augments that I can go into a tournament and see a completely fresh situation I've never seen before because I haven't played enough games to. So I think if I could change anything about what I did this set, it would just been play more games, and not like a drastic amount more, just enough that I feel like I'm comfortable seeing those routes that I couldn't already see.
Totally fair, totally fair. Guubums, I'm guessing, like, because what makes it really interesting is a lot of people were saying how 6.5 wasn't great for them. They already were either struggling with the concept of, I mean, players like Milk was even saying this is the worst set for him.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you're saying it's like the best TFT you played. Do you feel like that kind of makes a factor for you at all?
Okay, I think like saying it's the worst set is like a gross over exaggeration. Truth be told, I think we're coming off like probably one of the actual worst sets, which was 5 and 5.5. Just like pretty much by all metrics game. Like I guess like in terms of balance, it definitely was probably there, but like in terms of like how fun it was to play, I think most people will agree like 5 and 5.5 are among like the least fun, right? So I think that's probably an exaggeration. I think where 6.5 probably fails is a lot that like it feels like they're making mistakes that they shouldn't really make. Like the design team and balance team. That being said, I think like in terms of like throughout the set, I think they made a lot of good changes towards it, and like I as someone who just likes to play like a bunch of different random stuff, like I'm you know, I appreciate the variance offered by augments in a lot of cases.
Okay. Actually, I do have one more final question. Is North America Regionals the hardest competition to play in that isn't China Regionals? Guubums, what do you think?
No, I actually think Worlds is harder. I know like people were saying North American regionals. I really don't think so. I'm pretty sure Worlds is harder.
Okay. Ramblinnn, what do you think based off your evaluation?
I can't speak from experience of playing against other players at Worlds, but there's no shot that regionals of NA is harder. Okay. Maybe the final lobby is competitive with Worlds players, but as an overall event, definitely not.
Bryce, as an outsider, from a competitive perspective, but as a close watcher and observer, do you have any commentary on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. I think you can build a lobby of all North American players that is going to feel as competitive or more competitive generically than Worlds, but I think that the overall caliber of player at Worlds is higher, particularly once you get through day one. Day one, there's usually some people who kind of luck box their way into the event, and it is unusual that it becomes Zyku, right? It's unusual that person is able to like keep getting lucky and like tie breaking their way into the next days. So day one tends to be pretty soft at Worlds, but I think day two on usually is very, very strong competition at Worlds.
Yeah, I would also say like the top end like is where you'll like really see the notice. Like maybe like on average it's like maybe close to the same, but like you'll get some really, really quality players at the top.
It's been 18 months and Bryce is still bringing up Zyku. We're keeping you updated.
I mean, it's been over a decade and I still bring up Chris Moneymaker, so until I get a new one, he's my example.
All right. Let's talk about LCQ very briefly. We don't have to spend too much time upon this, but we saw Lucas and Ging take it. Ramblinnn, of course, was narrowly missing out on tiebreakers. I know Ramblinnn, we kind of opened up one wound, might as well just get the other one out of the way. When this happened, you know, what was going through your mind at this time? Were you kind of mad at the situation at all? Because I know the tiebreaker also was kind of weird with like least number of 8th places.
I mean, I was pretty numb at this point, to be honest. It's been enough that I've been through between Challenger Series against Guubums and then regionals and then LCQ. So I'm used to it at this point. I think the 8th place tiebreaker thing was definitely a mistake, but it's not something I can get mad at in the moment and say like, you should change this because that's the rules. You know? King didn't do anything wrong. He earned his spot just as much as I did, and he would probably be upset if the tiebreaker was different. So wasn't directing those feelings towards anybody else. Just, I mean, I felt really happy with my play, is what I'll say. I feel like I generally got lucky, like generally unlucky is what I mean. So
yeah, I mean, look,
go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were done. Finish that.
It's just like you can play so well, and I didn't play perfect, but I played as well as I thought I needed to get top 2, and that wasn't enough. So just gotta move on.
You did. You tied for top 2. You just lost a tiebreaker. Oh man, my heart, Bryce.
Next time.
I'm preaching to the choir. I'm like itching to get in here because I just have to say that it is a fucking travesty we haven't gotten to see Ramblinnn play at Worlds yet. He has been among the 2 to 3 best players in North America decisively for the last 2 sets. I actually think it's been like there have been very clear gaps as it relates to who are the tier 1A players in North America each of these sets, and Ramblinnn was in that tier both times, and to not make it, I'm just like, as a fan of TFT Ramblinnn, it is, I know that no one will be as sad about it as you, but like, I'm devastated. I'm like, I just want to see you compete on the world stage. I know you will represent the region so well. I know you will play TFT that is capable of winning the world championship whenever you get there, and you will get there. There's not a doubt in my mind.
I sure hope so. I'm not that upset about not making it at this point, because I'm happy enough with my own play that you just have to accept it. So every major event I've played in, I've made it to the final day. Like, you can't be too upset about that.
That's a good mentality. It's a good mentality. Let's do a real quick brief about Iniko's play. This is a North American player-centric podcast. Did you review VODs of Iniko either with him or separately? And if so, what do you think of his play?
Yeah, we went through all the VODs, both with Iniko and some of the other Worlds players, just to help them prepare. And I mean, I thought he played really well. The one game that stands out was a blemish, and he knows it. He didn't even want to have Yippee Maokai. Yeah, he did a VOD review on Reddit as well, and he said, just skip this game. There's nothing to learn from it. I know I fucked up. And that's sometimes you have those games, you know. I thought he played really well overall. He had really strong mental to bounce back from that rough of a game. I think he was kind of interacting with chat a little bit more than he probably should have too, and that was kind of getting in his head. But I mean, he was right there. He wasn't that much far off either, and so I was really happy for him, because even going back into regionals, he just I'm gonna say this. I don't know if he wants me to, but he almost dropped out. He literally was thinking about not playing, and I didn't give him like a strong push. I just said, "You're good enough to compete. You're good enough to do this," and he showed up. He 100% was, and I'm glad he did. So he should be happy with this play this set.
Damn, Coach Ramblinnn getting in there. I'm waiting for the documentary. Let's talk a little bit about Worlds now. I think we didn't have to spend too much time on LCQ. Now, this is where we kind of pass the baton to Guubums. This graphic, by the way, I'm not sure is correct. I think Guubums tied Wuzhou for 4th, but Wuzhou won the tiebreaker. If that's correct, Guubums?
Yeah, there's no way I win on tiebreaker.
Okay. But tied for 4th is, we'll just say that because
yeah,
I'm down.
T4.
Let's not talk too much about day 3. I think day 3 was very much just anticlimactic, only because of how dominant it was. It wasn't because China didn't deserve it. It wasn't because of any like outlandishly well, there was some kind of wild RNG with Kaisu at 7 in a Darkstar lobby. But let's talk a little bit more about your personal approach to Worlds, Guubums, and how well you think you did relative to your own expectations.
Okay, well, my approach was just, I felt that regionals, I was able to play a lot of stuff. So then I just think that like when I do well in tournaments, as I mentioned earlier, it's like I'm just comfortable playing with a lot of like all these different spots. So like I want to be like low roll resistant. Obviously, we understood going into the tournament that Silver was going to be really, really, really strong. The other interesting thing was that like in China, their regionals, they really liked Renata. And pretty much going into Worlds, like I was certain Renata was really bad. Oh, I played her actually a couple times, but that being said, like we pretty much ditched that strategy. So we knew Silver was gonna be strong. I tried to figure out like maybe some like different comps that might have been strong. Like I spent a lot of time working on Draven. Yeah, he sucks. Like really, really bad. Kind of sad.
The 4 clockwork angle kind of panned out.
Yeah. I used. I think 4 clockwork was probably my most played core throughout the tournament. It was really strong actually. I know like some of my results on it weren't actually the best. Like I think I got a lot of fits with it, but like I think like small mistakes here, small mistakes there, like some RNG factors here, some RNG factors there. Like the chance that like I think I top 2'd some of those 5 clockwork games was actually really high, but it just ended up happening that like maybe you just die on this thing there. I hid the 2 main things I hid was the 4 clockwork and Syndra. I got to play Syndra into a first I think at some point during the event, so that was pretty good as well. But yeah, I think I know you just said you didn't want to talk about the 3rd day, but like
let's talk about it. I want to know how dominant you felt China was. How much of that was good side of variance, and how much of that was them being better?
I think I don't think the world champion is the best player in the world. I think actually both. I think Li is better. I think Crazy is better, who got first on day 1, but like just got knocked out on day 2. Like literally, he was so 8 people make it. He was the 9th. And I think Aesah is actually probably better, just judging from what I've watched. And I think Huamie in a different meta would probably also be better. So I think, no, Liluo is like great. I think someone actually put me on watching his VODs, because I was watching a lot of CN VODs leading up to the event as part of my prep. I thought he was good, but I don't think he was like crazy good. I thought like some of the lines he took, I actually really, so I watched his 4th game, the game he actually won. I thought he was like turbo high roll, truth be told, but I actually liked the fact that it looked like he might have been angling 8 bodyguards just like straight from the start. So he picks a bodyguard hard, and it's like we all know that 8 bodyguard you win the game, right? So maybe like that was kind of like something that he did that I don't think I would have done, but I thought that was really cool. I think Liu Li was really good. I think they are dominant. I think they are playing like as you mentioned, there was like Kai'Sa on 7 in a Dark Star lobby, right? And he just won the game immediately. So there's like elements of that going on, but I noticed that they were like winning streaking every game, but I don't think that's because necessarily that everybody else wasn't down to play it or like wasn't able to win streak. I think like they just weren't given the spots to. Like I certainly wasn't in most of the games. So, and then finally, I would say like I thought I'd be really, really devastated actually after not winning Worlds. I think you guys might have seen my reaction to like seeing 8 bodyguards in the final game. I knew like at that point Worlds was over, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, like thinking about it some more, I don't really think I could have gone any higher. Maybe I could have gone 3rd in like some freak scenario, but okay, I should have also always gone 4th. I think me not getting 4th is like, I regret it now, but at the time I wasn't thinking about it too much. But yeah, those are kind of like my thoughts on Worlds as a whole.
Okay. Ramblinnn, how about you as a neutral observer? How did you feel about the Chinese play relative to the other regions?
I mean, I think they were clearly the best overall in terms of like region, looking at the region, the players. But like when I look at the results from Worlds, I don't necessarily equate who does the best as necessarily the region being the best, because it might just be those 2 players. I mean, the rest they had 6 reps and 2 of them got top 2. That's awesome for those 2 players, but that doesn't necessarily mean the region as a whole has a big gap over everybody else. And of course, I'd still put them at the top, but it's 4 games ultimately, and they definitely dominated those 4 games. But there could be 2 more games, and Guubums could go 1-1. You never know. So it's a really small sample size, and even if you add in the other 2 days, like yeah, China did really well, and they were the best. But that doesn't necessarily mean that other regions didn't do well as well. And NA was right there.
Thinking about NA region more broadly, do either of you have any thoughts about the other reps, right? DQA, Goose, and Milk. Obviously, Milk returning to Worlds, having a solid day 1, and then bombing out day 2. DQA had a rough-ish day 1, and Goose got all the way to the end.
I mean, I was really happy for Goose this whole set. I mean, this was definitely his arc. He didn't quite, pan out amazingly. He got 7th in the final day, but I remember somebody asked me about Goose earlier in the set, and I said I really respect his play. He has some of the best fundamentals when I watch him, and Robin is another example. I just think they're playing good TFT, and he just needs that extra level of endgame capping his boards to really push him over the hump, and he was able to figure out this set. He was able to adjust his style and get to a more consistent result where he can actually compete for the top 2s that he wasn't able to get before.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're going to do deeper dive on all these players when we get to the rankings reveal, but Goose is someone I think we'll spend a lot of time talking about because I think he really experienced kind of a renaissance in his play in 6.5, and it was cool to see.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say that we have a lot of P player cards to go through, so if we want to be able to spend 2-3 minutes talking about a player, we probably should move on a little bit. And so we have one final portion of the recap, and this was may or may not be request from Bryce. Bryce could use a dub right now. We have our fantasy draft results from the previous episode. For people who don't know, it was myself, Bryce, Soju, and Robin all drafting players at regionals. And the color code is if you were red, you were day 1. If you were brown/orange, you were day 2, and then green was day 3. And so based off these results, the most important thing is the bottom number, which is Bryce. The average placement of his pick was 10.5, so he won. I came in second with my average pick at 12.3. Robin at 13, very solidly behind. And Soju taking 4th at 14 average placement. So Bryce, a little bit of a victory speech here before we go to the next segment.
This draft was over when I got Guubums at this pick. I literally messaged Guubums. I was like, this is insane value, because he had been moving up my personal power rankings as I talked to him each successive day in the ramp up to the event. So I would have taken Guubums probably 4 or 5 picks higher, and by the end of the event, I felt like he was decisively the number 1. I also traded Milk for Setsuko.
Yeah. The gap would be huge.
Oh my god, it's already pretty big, but it would be light years ahead. I mean, it has to be said, when you get the god of TFT with your last pick, I agonized over that pick because I also really like Robinsongz. I really wanted him, but I was like, I can't not pick Souless. I felt like the upside was too strong, and my boy Souless got me. Thank you, Souless. Decisive victory for my team. By the way, Vile is really good. I think Vile low rolled to bust out on day 1. I think my whole team was pretty stacked.
That is true. That is true. I think Soju at least could have, faith. The fact that he picked his friend, one of his closest friends, and he won the event. So at least he got a nice little consolation prize. And if there's anything we've learned to never sleep on, the god of TFT, Soulless from TSM ever again. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the third segment of the show, which is the rankings. Now, this is the big culminating moment. We have our final rankings. Now, before we continue, I want to say that this rankings isn't just the normal rankings we usually do. This ranking should be something that a player can take away and said, this is my performance from the past season. When people say who was the MVP of the NBA season of the 2021 year or 2020 to 2021 season, they can kind of say that. We want to be able to have this ranking feel like whoever hits top 10 for the first time, right, when they didn't expect it, say, I was a top 10 player in set 6. Because the whole point is, who's top 10? It's always depending on LP and the patch and the most recent tournament. We want to have a definitive way to say it. So whoever gets anywhere from 15 to number 1, we want to have a lot of pride. And so we're walking away saying this is the official rankings of set 6. Bryce, is there anything to add on top of that?
No, I love it. Let's get into it. I'm excited to reveal the ranks.
Okay, so we start from the very bottom, but we also want to acknowledge those who barely didn't make it. So we start off with the text form. Sorry, we didn't have the fancy graphics prepared. For people who didn't make it in, the snub list. So starting at 16th, we have Nubal. Now, Nubal was already in the conversation, a little bit of a controversial one because he didn't even play for most of set 6 and 6.5, and yet he still got votes. Which is funny because we specifically said he's not eligible to some of these panelists, but they said, screw it, we're going to vote him anyways. He has such a strong impression on players that even when he can't get voted for, he got the vote and we said, you know what, this is too good of a story to pass up, and he still narrowly missed out. Bryce, I'm going to hand it over to you first.
I mean, Nubal is a beast. We were on Gangley's call-in show, and Guubums called in and was like, I think this Nubal guy is trash, and we were all just ganging up on Guubums to explain why he's wrong in that point of view. Yeah, I mean, look, Nubal is beast. I don't think he did qualify on this. And by the way, Spencer got in his ranking late, but Spencer ranked Nubal really high, like 5th or something, so if Spencer's ranking had come in on time, Nubal would have made the list. I mean, look, I don't think he deserves to be on this list. This list is about results and success from this set, and he only played the points 5 set basically, and even then he only played like the middle to end portion of it, so I don't think he belongs here. But if we were to build a list of the potential peak skill level of the best players in North America, obviously he belongs to that list. He belongs in the top 10.
Mm-hmm. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the other 3 here. Ramblinnn, I believe you may have voted for 2, if not 3 of these players. If so, what was the justification of you putting them on your rankings?
I have 2 of these 3 players, and the third one would have been my 16th. So I have Kivix and Robinsongz both on my list, and I think it's weird to not have them on other people's lists, honestly.
Same.
Kivix won mid-set. I mean, you have to give him something for that, right? And you have to respect his play style as being so unique compared to everybody else. So, I mean, I think he's definitely a snub to not make it. Robinsongz I can understand a little more just because he's didn't have any super standout performances, but just from playing against him and doing in-houses with him, and then of course he had some decent results in tourneys. He was pretty consistently just in the mix for the final days of not making it. One thing I always stood out to me about him is he was one of the players that was most willing to build his effort, and he seemed to prioritize it really heavily. So every game you were in with Robinsongz, he pretty much always had his effort blitz you had to worry about, and he was using that to his advantage because he was punishing people so hard for it. So I gave him some points for that, and especially as a player I wasn't super familiar with before the set, he definitely stood out to me.
Okay. And then Guubums, did you vote for anybody that's on this snub list, and if so, why?
No, I don't think I did. Okay, so obviously, I mean, my appreciation for Nubal is obviously pretty well known. So I would have put him on the list, but you guys made it pretty clear that he wasn't eligible, so I did not. That being said, I think I did my list purely based on I wasn't willing to rank anyone that I didn't watch, honestly. So I think Robinsongz Kenob obviously has the the tournament performance and the tournament results to warrant a spot on the list. That being said, I literally watched him play 0 times outside of playing with him. So I just didn't think it would be fair to me to ever rank him. Same is true, unfortunately, for Kivix. I know he won mid-set, but that's the one I got day 1 in, and then I got tilted watching day 2. Because I was okay, then I should have I was watching day 2 and I was getting so tilted because I was damn, if I just didn't get day 1, then I'm watching these people play, I feel like I could compete for sure as well, but I didn't feel like I was prepared well enough for that event, so I deserved to get day 1. And then as for Pawn Up was like roughly my number 16. I think I had a little bit of trouble putting him in the top 15. I watched him play in the earlier tournaments for sure. He was definitely something I was watching out for because this was back when he was also rank 1 for quite a while. So I was interested, so I did watch his play. I think he's quite good. I don't think he's like, you know, a top tier player, but I think he's like really kind of like on the cusp of that. Obviously, he does have some of the results to back that up, and I think like as the sets progress, I think we can expect to see more of him for sure.
Yeah, Pawn Up was an incredibly strong player at the beginning of set 6, and it feels like he slowly fizzled out as more tournaments started ramping up in intensity, but still very good performance this set, so shout out to him. On the final note, just to stroke my ego alongside Bryce, Ram says, I don't know how players like Robinsongz didn't get more votes. 3 people voted for Robinsongz exactly at 15th. Ramblin's one of them. Myself and Bryce were 2 other people who did, so casters know what's up. Just want to point it out.
These are legit snubs. Both of these are Kivix and Robinsongz both belong on this list. Guubums has been really public in talking about the fact that he thinks that pro players just rank based on reputation and they don't actually watch a lot. And I think that that's why Kivix and Robinsongz are not on the list. They both of them are very interesting players. They're the type of players that pros should be studying because they both kind of dance to the beat of their own TFT drum. They both, like, Kivix is a reroll madman. He's trying to figure out how to reroll all sorts of different units that people aren't thinking about playing around. And Robinsongz, in addition to prioritizing Zephyr, just plays tempo completely differently than other players and is willing to roll and roll super deep in spots that other people aren't even thinking about rolling. And if you look at their raw results, Kivix played 4 tournaments this set. He day 3'd Piltover and Zon. He won mid-set, and he got 13 at regionals when he was, by the way, pretty underprepared because I do all my interviews going into regionals, and it was clear that he was not quite up to the level he had been. So those results are like, there are no blemishes on that record. And then Robinsongz, he barely did not day 3 on Piltover. He took 5th in Zon, which is like a 200-person field. He took 6th at mid-set. He took 10th at Inno Cup, and he took 15th at regionals. Like, he also did not have a bad event. So I think they met the eye test. The results spoke for themselves. I think both these people belong on the top 15 list.
Maybe next set, if they can keep up their good, consistent performances. I think a lot of these names have a lot of opportunity to move up, especially because some of the names that we bring up might be on their way down. But that's enough of the snub list. It's time to reveal the top 15 rankings for North America Teamfight Tactics professional play for set 6. Let's start off with number 15, shall we? Drum roll, please. It is Dishsoap. Dishsoap is a newcomer relative to a lot of the other names that we're going to be seeing, and he comes in at number 15, despite having okay results, nothing that's particularly outstanding. So what makes a player like Dishsoap stand out? And I want to toss it over to Ramblinnn, a fellow AP expert who might be able to add some color to Dishsoap's play and maybe why he got to this spot.
Well, Dishsoap had pretty consistent results on ladder. You always saw him competing. I mean, you play against him, you know he's up there in your lobbies. That's the easiest way to get recognized. And Dishsoap was playing AP when a lot of people weren't. You know, I'm in that boat as well. And I think that was really to his advantage this set, is he was able to master the AP tree as much as he possibly could as a player and just leverage that advantage over the rest of the server that wasn't taking advantage of it.
Yep, I think that's really concise. I think that Dishsoap stands out because the way he plays naturally stands out in a set where everyone says it's really about AD. The only viable AP isn't even that strong, especially with repeated nerfs to Renata and Vi over time. Guubums, do you have any insight specifically into Dishsoap from a competitive perspective, because you've played against him a lot too?
Like based on like in tournaments, it's difficult to say for sure. I did notice that like his expertise on the AP tree. Like I watched him. I've just been on his stream and like just hearing about the ideas. I think he frequents a lot of other people's streams as well. Like hearing some of the ideas that he puts out there, I quite liked. So as I mentioned, I only put people on the list if I had watched them play or at the very least had talked to them. And like Dishsoap is like someone whose ideas like I've heard a lot of, so I was comfortable with him up there. I think like yeah, as Ramblinnn said, like his mastery over the AP tree was like an advantage that he had over a lot of other players who weren't really willing to play the AP tree. So yeah. I would like to see like you should, even though you want to master like a tree, I think like it's still important to expand your horizons a little bit and still be able to play other trees kind of like at a higher level or as high of a level as you could possibly play it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think even if you are focused on one tree, understanding the conditions of others is really important because you can understand what they're trying to accomplish on their board, and that becomes very critical in terms of how you play around late game scenarios. I think Ramblin's a really good example of this, actually, where it's like, obviously Ramblin was played a lot more AP than AD this set, but if you think that Ramblin did not know the ins and outs of the AD tree, then you're not paying attention, and I think that was a little bit of a weakness for Dishsoap. I also think Dishsoap approach the game a little bit too narrowly for someone to, you know, break into like the top 10, top 5, right? When you talk to Ramblinnn about the AP tree, he's seeing a lot of different outs and variations of those outs. He bridges like Renata and Ari in I think more creative ways than Dishsoap does, whereas Dishsoap could be a little bit linear in his approach. But I think of Dishsoap really similar to like an Aesah, for example, where if you watch them play, they're doing some things really, really well. And it's the type of thing where if they keep working at it, there's no doubt in my mind that he continues to move up the list because there is so much potential when you watch Dishsoap play.
Yes, 100%. And, you know, I wanted to put Dishsoap on my ranking, just very publicly. It's also going to be published on esports media website, esports.gg, where we show all our rankings. So we're not just like hiding behind it. It's not just that people arbitrarily making decisions. There was an actual metric and methodical way we came to this approach. I wanted to put Dishsoap on my top 15. I hyped him up so much going to regional, saying this is the last time you're going to hear his name and not think about a top TFT player in NA. Largely because players that do what he doesn't do it very commonly, which is hold rank 1 and rank 2 simultaneously, which is to also play an uncontested tree and do it in that fashion. Really push the way NA was even thinking about AP as a region. I just really think highly about his play, and I think set 7 is going to be a time where he pops off. So this is just the beginning. Now, that being said, 15 is done and dusted. Let's go to 14, which is probably one of the longest discussions that we'll have. It is K3 Soju from Cloud9, who, when people were doing their rankings, was moving further and further down. At the beginning of the show, we ran a prediction poll. Would Soju make the top 15? He narrowly did by 4 points. Now let's hop on over to Bryce. What is about Soju with this ranking? Does it feel fair to put him at 14? Does he even belong here in 14?
So I did not rank Soju, and it's because to be clear, I've ranked him in my top 15 in every other power ranking we've done, and I think I will probably rank him again when we start the new set. But a huge part of this set, or this ranking specifically, was the results, right? It was like a kind of a time capsule of how set 6 went, and I honestly have no idea by what metric someone put Soju on this list if it's heavily results oriented. I mean, you can look at the stats on screen. He basically didn't have a single impressive event other than the Challenger Series 6.5, which, if we're being honest, was a crazy soft field. Like, that was not a tournament that I took anything meaningful away from because it was just not the level of competition that I want to be comparing against. Like, when I want to be thinking about a player of this caliber, I want to compare him to how they perform in tournaments where basically this list is all competing against each other, and basically no one on this list, actually literally no one on this list, was in that field. So for me, I think he's getting here more based on reputation and eye test alone, which if you're rating based on eye test, anyone who watches Soju play and thinks he's bad at TFT has no idea what they're talking about. He is insanely good at TFT, particularly when he's in form and when he's sweating. I just don't think the results justify it this set.
Guubums, do you agree with that? You've played with him the most in the past month and a half or so.
Okay, so I have so as I mentioned earlier, like I wasn't willing to kind of like put anyone on my list that I wasn't watching, right? And obviously Soju is like someone I've watched the most of. Like, not only is he like obviously really, really entertaining on Twitch, but as you guys mentioned, I've like just been in call with him. Okay, truth be told, in the last month I took absolutely nothing away from that. Those were like some of the worst games. Like,
I literally had to tell you walked in. I was worried about you going into Worlds. I was like, you need to stop this shit. You need to actually like I need you to get focused again because you're not in form right now.
Yeah, we were arguing with him in the Discord chat like, bro, this is not helping your play.
Yeah, okay, so completely discounting all of that, like, I think Soju just, like, I say this a lot, like, I think he just plays TFT well, right? Like, I don't know if, like, he has, like, really cool ideas outside of the game. Like, I don't think he's, like, really kind of, like, trailblazing on any particular way to play the game. I think, like, I think, in terms of ladder, he's pretty much, like, top 5, I think, throughout the last 2 sets. Obviously, I do put more emphasis on tournament results than ladder. But I do think ladder is important, and I think like he was actually quite dominant. You know, rank 1 multiple times. I think he was like 4th in snapshots in set 6. He definitely hit rank 1 in wait, did he have rank 1 at 6.5? Truth be told, 6.5 ladder is a little bit sus because that's when like a lot of people really like started taking a break. I personally have spent the last month in GM, so yeah. And then yeah, I think like just from Soju's like I benefit from being able to like watch him play. I noticed also that like Soju does a lot of things that like I personally wouldn't do. And like when I watch the game pan out like based on that decision making, I've noticed that like he does like well on some of those decisions. So it's like something that I personally wouldn't do and it pans out. Like when I see stuff like that, I think like okay, like that there's something to be said about that for sure.
There are 3 people on this podcast that didn't put Soju in their top 15. Again, this is all going to be transparent. We put it out for a reason. It's myself and Bryce and Ramblinnn. So Ramblinnn, Soju didn't make your top 15. Is there a particular reason why?
Soju didn't make my top 17 actually. If you gave me the chance to rank 18 players, he would have been number 18. I actually am usually somebody that rates Soju higher than most. I respect his play a lot. He's really good at capping his board because he practices his Soju special so often. He has that experience to back it up, but this was not his set. And I don't think you can look at these results and possibly rank him in the top 15. I think it is a mistake to have him over some of the other players we talked about earlier, Kivix and Robinsongz, and the other 2 I would have mentioned are Pawn Up and even Noster. I think just had better sets, and that's not to say that they're better players necessarily. They might not be the better player next set, but I just don't think he really showed up this set.
I think I agree. And I think he would also probably tell you firsthand, especially when it came down to the Challenger Series of all things, where he realized, like, this is my last chance to qualify. I better take this Challenger Series seriously. That just kind of a reflection of Soju's set. But, hey, trust. Set 7, he's the hype conductor. He's been leading the charge, saying Set 7 will be a good time. Want to point out one last thing, is that Ramkev and Setsuko made up over half of Soju's points in voting. These 2 players put a high premium on Soju's play relative to everybody else who just left him off. So if Soju wanted to thank 2 people in particular, it's Ramkev and Setsuko. So with that, we are done talking about Soju. Our next person at number 13, the luckiest number, it's Aesah, another newer face to competitive. Aesah's been playing for quite some time, even used to work for Riot, but now is on the streaming side and competitor side and really came out of the gate super hot at the beginning of set 6. And then 6.5 rolled around a little bit slower, as you can see. Innovation Cup and regionals didn't go his way. Bryce, what happened to Aesah after that really amazing first half?
Well, so I don't want to overrate. I don't think it's like an Aesah fell off situation. I think that he probably was overperforming relative to his skill level earlier and maybe underperforming relative to his skill level in some of these final events. So Aesah's he's a newer player relative to the overwhelming majority of this list, and there were a lot of things. That's why I compared to Dishsoap. There's a lot of things he does really well, but there's some pretty glaring weaknesses in Aesah's play still that he's working on. He identifies them. He's a very intentional player, and his focus on improvement and his reflection on his own gameplay is some of the best on this list. So I'm really confident. Dishsoap, I don't know Dishsoap's process as well, but I've watched enough Aesah to think like, okay, I'm really confident if he just keeps going, he's going to keep moving up this list. But he's not there yet. Most of his success, like really high level success in these tournaments, was a knowledge gap, not a skill gap. He was playing Innovators before people were playing it, and he was playing it differently and better. And you could say the same thing about Mutants in set 6. And I think he was just a much better player kind of earlier in the set because he was paying attention to some of these things and figuring out some of these trees in a creative and ultimately successful way. And I think once he lost that edge, he really didn't have an edge against the other players in the top 15.
Okay. Ramblinnn, would you agree with a lot of what Bryce said?
Yeah, I mean, it's only 2 events, but he really did not have nearly the showing in the second half, and it's pretty obvious why. He just wasn't able to find his comfort comps, and it's not that he plays exactly the same as Robin, but that aspect of him is very similar, is that they don't have the comp that they can execute the comp really well, but they're not the ones like that are just going to be able to navigate their way through a game flexibly and figure it out as they go. They really need to have it come in with a game plan. His game plan just wasn't as strong for 6-5, and maybe that's just a set diff. Maybe he just couldn't find that comp that worked for him, and that's what ended up being the reason he wasn't able to perform as well.
That being said, you rated him pretty high. You were one of 2 people to really rank him very firmly within your top 10. The other person being Natures, which really he put Aesah as high as 6th, which was quite high relative to everybody else. Guubums, you ranked Aesah there. You put him closer to the bottom. Do you feel like Do you feel like all this talk about Aesah's weaknesses is really fair and justified?
Okay, so at regionals, I actually had the opportunity to play against him. I think like in 4 out of my 6 games. That's just how the lobbies went out. I noticed that sorry, I'm talking about his weaknesses first, which is gonna sound bad maybe, but like I noticed like in those games, it didn't seem like he was playing the lines. It was actually like 2 Synaptic lines. It didn't seem like he was playing that very correctly. It seemed like I just didn't like that style of play at all. Like as a kind of like pertains to Synaptic, which I thought might have been like one of his strengths given how comfortable he was on Mutants in 6.0. That being said, I think the reason why I put Aesah on my list is because I've listened to like the ideas he has about the game, and there are like some weaknesses in his play for sure when I watch him. And I think when I do watch him, I do think he's worse than like the players I've put above him. But I think like the ideas he has about the game are like a little bit novel. I think they're interesting, and I think they're worth having. And I think we want to have more players with like that are coming up with ideas in the way that he is. So I think like he has the potential to be a really good player, as kind of like Bryce said. I think like his kind of like motivation to improve, day over day, patch over patch is commendable for sure as well. So I'm excited to see like what he does in the future sets. But yeah, I would agree with most of the kind of like the weaknesses you guys outlined.
How is it? Set 6, Mutants was barely playable, very niche. Aesah's an expert in it, and Set 6.5, Mutants broken in so many different ways, culminating in like 3 or 4 out of the variations leading up into the final competitive patch. They were all super strong. Now, granted, of course, we're talking about regionals. Regionals is mainly Synaptic, but I just find it a little bit funny, just the way that panned out.
The mutant tree evolved. So when he was playing Mutants, the way in which he approached Synaptic was really good at the time, but then he wasn't used to getting Omega contested when he played Synaptic, and that's, I think, what Guubums is talking about, that like some of his lines fell off. And he was playing around Cho'Gath a lot when he was playing Mutants really well, is when Cho'Gath was more like you wanted to actually put items on that unit, you wanted to buy and play that unit, whereas by the time regionals rolled around, I mean, if anyone suggested, Guubums playing Mutants, if anyone suggested putting any items on Cho'Gath, he'd be like, nice try, guy, every single time. And I think that's right. I think Cho'Gath was like the weakest 3 cost in the game. It was literally just like a trait bot. And so I think that the mutant tree evolved, and he did not figure out where the mutant tree was by the time of regionals/worlds. He was still kind of stuck in what he was doing originally in Set 6.
Yeah, and it was a big time frame, like you said. Mutants continued to evolve patch over patch, especially after buffs, and I see what you did there. Mutants evolved. Nice job, Bryce. And that's enough about Aesah in 13th. He's on his way up alongside Dishsoap. So that brings us to number 12. And that is Mismatched Socks, a player who does know about 1-2, but this time he finds himself at 12th. Now, Socks is a player that I think everyone looked at this ranking and says, that doesn't seem right. Why is he 12th? We know what Socks is capable of. But this set, if you look at it holistically, it feels more on the fair side. I mean, the man had his baby, Ryan, and he was still trying to put out content. He was still, speaking of which, he was still putting out his YouTube series. He's developing his own game, so it's only natural that Socks would take a step back from his results. But I think 12 is very surprising. And Ramblinnn, when you look at a player like Socks, does 12 feel right when you see him here?
Yeah, that's pretty much where I put him. And the thing about this ranking is I think Socks is a better player. Like, we know he's a very good player. We know he's one of the best. But even just in the context of these 2 sets, I think he was a better player than his results showed. And sometimes just how TFT goes. I'm not going to say he got unlucky. Maybe just had a bad day, whatever. But it just didn't end up working out for him. And that's, with the sample size that we have, it's going to happen. So I fully expect him to bounce back. Especially, like, you got to be impressed that he's even competitive taking care of his son, honestly. Yeah, I think this is a reasonable rating for him.
Yeah, the other side of it is it's impressive. This guy still made it in the top 12. You saw how people were sweating their butts off day and night, and he's kind of doing it. He's like part-time of part-time and still making the top 12. Would you agree with that sentiment, Bryce?
Yeah, going in, I had a kid like 4 or 5 months before the set came out, or before Socks, I should say. My kid turned 1 a couple days ago, or yesterday, actually. And when he started the set, I was like, "There's no way!" Like the sleep deprivation, the split priorities, the stress and pressure that's getting added to your life. That is so hard. And then he added a game design on top of that, plus his full-time job. I mean, it is just a testament to how freaking good he is. And by the way, if he doesn't leak the tech, he almost guarantees qualifies for Worlds. And then who knows what happens? And then we might be rating him totally differently. So, you know, this man, he's just spent so much time educating the TFT community, does not optimize for his own placements. And I agree with Ramblinnn. I think he low rolled a little bit. I think there were some tournaments where he was in better form than his results ultimately panned out. I think this is probably about right for him on the list, but his potential is number one when Sox is focused and in form.
Guubums, any last words on Sox? I feel like we've covered most of everything about this guy in terms of his past 6 months.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you guys nailed it. Like, I think I practiced with Sox probably the most out of anyone. Like, granted, like, Bert had quit and New Balls, like, AFK, so those are like my 3 main practice partners. So I practice a lot with Sox. I'm pretty sure the chance that he doesn't make Worlds if he doesn't leak Sivir is, like, legit, like, close to 0. Sivir, I mean, we know how broken Sivir is now, but, like, imagine how broken she was back then. Like, holy crap. Like, this is, like, I don't know. Anyways. So I think he for sure should have made it. I think, yeah, that was really, really dumb. I don't know. I rated him at 10.
Yeah.
I talked to him a lot, and even, like, going, like, through regionals, like, going through the days, I still kind of, like, put him as a big threat to, like, make it to Worlds, like, with everything, you know, with Sivir being as contested as she was. So, I don't know. It was kind of hard for me to rate him. I think, like, as you guys mentioned, like, his potential is, like, really, really high. And I think, like, just in general, he's one of the best. But, yeah, it was difficult to rate him, like, too much higher than where I put him.
Sox, we're looking at set 7 for your big comeback, or whenever your baby gives you a break, because we all know that's
Ryan's going to college next year, so it's fine.
Sox's kid, I believe it. Let's reveal number 11, the 1-1. It is Spencer. Spencer, a player who was probably the most vocal, at least outwardly facing, about how little he cared about some of the competitive tournaments. And yet, despite that, put on some very good results while also, you know, playing other games while competing. It's quite enraging, but also very impressive on multiple accounts. Bryce, talk a little bit more about Spencer here.
He's underrated. I have him like 4 spots higher or 5 spots higher, unless I don't remember exactly where I put him. When we're talking about the ceiling players in TFT, I put him really, really high. I think that when Lost Streak is in meta, I think Spencer and Milk are my top 2. When like Lost Streak is like a really strong way to play the game, or something more favorable than Win Streak. I don't think he's as good of a Win Streak player or a tempo player, but his results are really, really consistent and good throughout. He got 12th at Innovation Cup while second screening a different game. Like he passes the eye test. I don't know why he's this low. And this is the worst set of TFT that Spencer's played. Like, this was not his set in a bunch of different ways. I don't think he was as invested in the set. Definitely not as invested in 6.5. And I think even in set 6, he was a little bit less invested. So I think he's too low.
Guubums, you ranked Spencer the highest of anybody. Want to go next here and follow up Bryce's point about him being rated too low?
Wait, really? It sounded like Bryce ranked him high. I ranked him at 9.
No, you ranked him. According to this, you ranked Spencer.
Oh wait, sorry. Yeah, you're right.
8.
7, right?
At 8.
Oh, was it 8? Anyways, yeah. I mean, Spencer's good. Okay, my gripe with Spencer is I feel like because Spencer would probably, I mentioned my 3 practice partners. Spencer's probably number 4. I'm pretty sure this guy has like the worst ideas about TFT. But like when you tell him what to do, or when he figures out what to do, like actually. Like, he just plays it, like, really super, super consistently, and he's super, super good at it. I think, like, he's, I don't know how much he actually lets this kind of, like, affect him, but I've noticed that, like, he'll, like, misattribute things to, like, certain RNG elements that I don't really think is, like, kind of, like, what went wrong. So, like, he has, like, those aspects, but, like, as you guys mentioned, the ceiling on this player is absurd, and when he knows what he's doing, then he's, like, capable of doing well. But as you guys mentioned as well, the guy pretty much just doesn't care, so, yeah.
Ramblinnn, anything else to add here about Spencer? I think we've touched most of it here.
I think ranking him is pretty open between like 8 and 13ish, and like maybe he goes on the higher end for some people, but just see the level of effort is to see there this set, and like his results were still solid is the thing to consider. So you can consider that impressive or anything, but I just feel like, but it wasn't his best set in terms of results and work ethic. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I can't rank him much higher, honestly.
Yeah, and just for reference, there is a significant point gap between Spencer at 11th and number 10, which we're going to reveal here in just momentarily. Spencer was a lot closer to Sox and Aesah than he was to some of these other players that we're about to talk about. But we all know about the potential of Spencer. Set 5, he really put on a great performance. And let's see if he can strike back, if Set 7 can ignite that flame again. All right, here we go. Top 10. Shall we do it, Bryce?
Oh, I'm excited. 10 is going to be a banger.
10 is the god of TFT.
Yes!
That is right. TSM Souless breaks the top 10, outplaces Spencer, Sox, Aesah, Soju, and Dishsoap. That's right. First reactions, Bryce. Last pick on fantasy. First pick overall next time you're doing a fantasy draft. What is it about Souless that makes him so enigmatic, but also really fun to watch?
Yeah, enigmatic is the right word for Souless. This dude is all over the place when he plays TFT. There are times when you watch Souless play, and it's just beautiful. And it's different than how some other people would approach it, but he is finding value in units and in lines that other people are really missing. He's always a dangerous player in any tournament where he enters. I really believe that, but he also has moments that I watch a lot of TFT. I think this, I'm kind of known for this. I study a lot of VODs. I love watching different people play. I think it's so interesting. I scratch my head watching Souless VODs more than anybody on this list by like a factor of 5. There are times when I'm just like, what on earth, bro? But that's kind of what you get with him. It's a wild ride, and you know, to show up to Innovation Cup. I mean, 21st doesn't look that impressive, but he practiced for 5 minutes and showed up to the Innovation Cup and outplaced like Soju and Aesah and others, Sox, right? Like, and he had some good performances that day on literally no prep. And then at regionals, he was the least prepared player in the field, probably, or certainly among them. Yeah, fair, right? And he min-maxed the hell out of this thing. He like made the final day. He got maximum prize pool, but without making LCQ or World, so that he could go back to playing a different game. What a genius! I mean, come on. He's the god of TFT. No one can ever take that away from him. That is his moniker in my heart until the end of his days in TFT.
I love it. I love it. Now, on the one end is Bryce, who couldn't be more excited for Souless. Then you have Guubums. If he slouches any further from his chair, he's going to be invisible for us on the podcast. Guubums, Souless makes top 10. Reactions. Tell me.
Okay, like, first and foremost, like, Souless is not better than Spencer or Sox. Like, there's just no way. Okay, also, I don't know how... Okay, let me explain for the people who don't know, but I'm pretty sure most people know. Okay, so after one of the sets, or before one of these rankings, I was just talking to Souless about his ranking, right? And he puts himself 1, and I'm like, hey. And then he convinces me over, like, the course of a couple hours to also put him, like, top 2 or something like that. Top 3, maybe. And then at some point, he convinces me to VOD watch him. And then I started VOD watching him with Spencer because I was prepping at the time. And then me and Spencer are watching this, and it's like, it's actually, like, not good gameplay, right? And then he somehow baits me and Spencer into pretty much just coaching him for 5 games of VOD review. It's really, really bad play. Okay, anyways, whatever. And then, like, okay. Oh, God.
Are you saying that he outplayed you in that moment? Is that what you're saying? That he got
No, he completely outplayed me. He got baited so hard.
You donated your time. Spencer doesn't even coach.
He got 2 coaches.
Me and Spencer just sitting there, getting our time, like, just completely It's so illegal. Okay, anyways, he's not actually better than Sox and Spencer, so I didn't put him. Like, pretty much, I had trouble putting him too high on my list, because, like, once again, like, I don't think he's better than Sox and Spencer. I do think, like, his tourney results are actually, like, very, very impressive, honestly. So I think, like, he deserves to be somewhere. And I think, like, that being said, like, I don't think he's, like, a terrible player, but, like, it's just, I know Sox, I know Spencer, I obviously value their opinions very highly, which is why I'm willing to practice with them as much as I am. So, and then just, like, looking at that, and then, yeah, I think, I don't know, there's something weird going on here.
Ramblinnn, bring some rationale, bring some reason to this extreme conversation we're having right now. What is it about Souless?
He's the best high roll in A, and that's a skill in itself. It's one thing to high roll, but to high roll and take advantage of it. Like, I'm not going to say that he played flawlessly in any of these tournaments or optimally, or that's not necessarily better than Spencer or Sox, but you have to give him credit for these placings, especially as everybody knows, for such little prep and such little effort. It's not flukes. You know, there's a level of RNG to it, and there's a level of high rolling to it, but these results are insane. So I have to give him some credit.
It's incredibly consistent. I mean, he was day 3, almost all his tournaments. Gangly and Natures, the tournament organizer, the journalism side of it, just put them really high. Although I will say, Souless, in terms of his points, is in a tier of his own because he has people ranking him as low as 15th and other people ranking him in the top 5. So it's really extreme on Souless, which I guess goes back to what we said in the beginning. He's quite the enigma.
Who?
How many of those top 5s are gangly?
Just one. But you can check them all out at esports.gg/TFTPR. And that's it about Souless. What a great start to this ranking so far.
Oh, yeah.
Now we get to the single digits, and I think this one might be a pretty big surprise for some people who haven't followed very closely. It's Iniko. Actually, the artist formerly known as Inikoiniko. Just Iniko right now. Now, Iniko started off pretty rough, right? Like, he was not actually putting out a lot of good results. He wasn't, like, dominating ladder the way he was in set 5. And then 6.5 hit, and all of a sudden it felt like a light switch, and he came charging all the way from Innovation Cup to Regionals to LCQ. Let's go to Ramblinnn, a person who's been spending the most time with Iniko lately, and just get a little bit of commentary about his past set performance.
He's a good friend, and I'm really happy he turned it around. It's just like, he was always good. He was always, competitive, but maybe set 6 wasn't his set. I don't know. I didn't follow him too closely. Set 6-5 came around, and just like you said, something clicked, and I'm really glad it did for him because he was one of the best players at the events, and the results show it, both at Innovation Cup Regionals and then even at LCQ. He was right there, so I'm really happy for him, and I think this is a good rating for him. I'm glad to see him have a good set.
Yeah, he put in the work. I value that really highly. We, Dan and I bounce around to a bunch of different kind of challenger discords and hang out with people as they're prepping because some of the most interesting stuff is when you guys are actually really sweating and trying to get better at the game and prepare for these big tournaments. And Iniko was always there. He was part of all the VOD reviews. He was joining, Frodan's doing all these VOD reviews, and he's joining the streams and kind of trying to download that knowledge and hang out with different players and playing on his own. I think that the analog for me with Iniko was Noster, which is that there are flashes of really good gameplay, but there's also like some inconsistency, and they get into lines where they're uncomfortable and kind of make some very large mistakes. And I think that the difference between Noster and Iniko is that Iniko was like, okay, this is where I want to be, and I'm willing to put in the work to get there, and he absolutely did. These results in set 6 were probably a little bit worse than his actual capability at the time, but the difference between them is not just RNG. It is the caliber of play. He made there's a few people who made big leaps this set. Appies is one of them. We're going to talk about Appies at some point.
Wow, spoiler alert.
Well, if you don't think Appies is in the top 8, you haven't been paying attention. But yeah, I think Iniko's another one. I think he made a major leap, and I'm so excited to see if he keeps investing in that way where his game is going to go.
Yeah. And Bryce basically took the words right out of my mouth. When I'm prepping for Worlds, Iniko didn't really have to, and yet he sat there and watched with me pretty much every night. And actually, it's really funny because Guubums and Rambo were the other 2 people who would also stop by, but Iniko was there pretty much every single time. And what's really great about Iniko too is that he's so open-minded about a bunch of things. I really can sense the desire to improve more than the desire to be right, and I think that's definitely a big thing that you have to differentiate between some TFT players who just kind of want to be right in some of these calls versus those who just want to learn. And I think Iniko, I don't think this is his ceiling. I think he has a lot to continue to pile on this momentum. To be fair, the end of set 5 was the same way. He had a lot of momentum, and then going into set 6, it felt like that was halted. We'll see whether or not he's able to keep that light on going into the next set.
We have to pause really fast because when you talked about players liking being right more than being open-minded, Guubums just got the shit-eating grin on his face.
Yeah, Guubums, go ahead. What do you want to say to that?
Oh, I mean, that's completely fair. But I actually think I'm also really open-minded to improving as well. It's kind of like a bit of both. Like, I'm like the both extremes, I guess. Yeah. But as for Iniko, I think I didn't have him rated at all in set 6, honestly. But I watched him a lot in Innovation Cup, which was, I think, probably his first breakout performance, like really breakout performance, let's say. And I had him as high as pretty much 8 after that one. And I pretty much, when there was a list that came out after Innovation Cup, and pretty much what it was for me was like, I ranked like 1 to 8. I think Iniko hit like the 7 or 8 mark. And after that, I was just like, everyone else, I don't really care. So for me, like, I do put a lot of stock, I guess, on his play. I think, so we watched LCQ together, and I don't want to, like, I guess, I don't know. like I think he made mistakes that were mistakes, and that I think he would know that they were mistakes if he had watched them as well. And I think like had he just like been better prepped in those spots, I think he could have made a even better run at LCQ. But as I guess Ramblinnn already alluded to, he made a great one at LCQ and he was definitely competitive. And that being said, like it being a top 2 tournament is already really really difficult, right? So I think he definitely deserves his spot at number 9, number 8, anywhere between 8 to like I think 10. I'd be.
Yeah, I think it was surprising that most people agreed within this range. There was probably like 3 or 4 spots of variation. I actually ranked him pretty highly, partially because I think I put a little bit more emphasis toward the later half of the tournaments as opposed to the beginning. I put a lot more on Innovation Cup regionals and then, of course, LCQ that he got to compete in as opposed to Piltover and Zon. But I think it's totally fair. And Iniko, as you said, he's making mistakes and yet he's still doing this well. This is certainly not his ceiling. Let's see what he's got in set 7. Okay, now we get to the top 8. Now, top 8, in terms of abstract thinking, could be the players that you expect to see at day 3 of a lot of competitions, because you have 8 players in the lobby. And so top 8 already starts to show that you are a cut of consistency above the rest. And who better to demonstrate this kind of consistency than Mr. Olge himself, time flies connoisseur.
Really?
It is Robinsongz at number 8. Guubums, your first reaction was, wait, really?
Oh, I thought he'd be higher. Wait, where did I put him? One sec. Oh.
Watch, you put him 8. Do you put him 8?
I think I put him 8 or 7.
I was gonna say, I thought you put him right there.
Guubums put him 6th. Or 7th.
Okay.
7th, excuse me.
7.
Oh,
Right.
what an outrage. It's outrageous.
Oh, I mean, I think Robin's good. Like, really, really. I think Robin's, like, just super consistent. I think, like, the way he plays in tournaments as well, like, favors, I think in a lot of tournaments, this won't be true for every tournament or every meta. I think the way he plays tournaments just, like, it makes me, like, I don't know, it just makes me happy, I guess. Like, he rolls when he needs to, like, he's not, like, overly greedy. He just, like, I feel like he's just always doing what he needs to do. I think at regionals, because I did VOD review pretty much all his games at regionals, or at least all his final day games. I think he could have just been better prepared. He could have known more lines. But I think that being said, like Robin is always like a player who does really well at like sticking to the lines that he's comfortable with, and if he can execute on those comps, and he's like super consistent. And we've seen this consistently, not just through this set. I guess like Piltover and mid set and Inno Cup, he's not doing the best, but like he has like some mix and match results for sure. But I think like over the course of TFT's history, he's just always been really consistent in tournaments. I think like he might actually be the single most consistent tournament player in all of TFT in North America. So. Yeah, I'm happy to see him around here. I like, as you guys know, I put him slightly higher. I think, truth be told, he's pretty much just like flipping and flopping between about 3 rankings here. So I have him higher than the person that I'm going to guess is coming next, but yeah.
Okay, well, I want to add one thing to this. Robin, pretty much outside of the top 3 players, you go to number 8. Robin has almost the most consistent rankings across the board. Almost everybody had him within 1 placement, except for 1 person, and it's Ramblinnn. Ramblinnn actually put Robin in his bottom 5 players of this set.
Oh,
I have
the
to
betrayal.
I mean, these are all public. These are all public, and they can find it out. And I want to ask, because Ramblinnn probably has the most intimate knowledge being his duo partner. He's competed with him multiple times in this set. So, Ramblinnn, can you add some context and color as to why that is?
Oh, he's really bad at playing mercs. That's my main takeaway from this.
Oh, no. Even after that 1 HP victory?
There's too many times in double up he cashes out in stage 3 because he's too afraid to play a weaker board, and I don't know. He always wants to save HP, and he's just not very good at that. The problem with Robin in this set is not mercs, so it's augments. And this is something I have a lot of experience because I've played with Robin so much and I've talked to him so much, is that he's a very conventional player. He knows his lines. He can play those lines very well. He can execute them. But he's not very good at figuring them out himself, and he's definitely not very good at figuring them out on the fly. And for as many games of Robin I've watched, and I'm not somebody that's sitting there literally chatting the entire time telling him what to do, it feels like there were way too many times that there were lines that I would immediately see that he had no idea existed. And that's because he doesn't really play into that flexible style as well of that augments offer you. He can't see an augment and completely pivot his line of thinking. He's already committed before he sees his augment. So if he doesn't see an augment that lines up with the way he wants to play, he's not going to consider it at all. And I think that was a bit of a drawback for him this set. That's why I had rated him a little lower. I think rating him here is reasonable. Like, I don't think it's a bad rating for him. I just think that he wasn't able to find his potential this set, and hopefully he can bounce back next set.
It's just not the kind of Robin that was in set 5, is what you're trying to say, versus in set 6. It didn't.
Right. If he finds his comp, he can just play it every game the way he wants to. You can't do that with augments.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Bryce, we heard from the players first. Any commentary to add here about Robin?
I think this is basically right for Robin. I talk about certain players as being linear thinkers in TFT, and I think Robin is one of them, and I think he's among the best linear thinkers in TFT. He is really good at understanding the dynamics and conditions of lines that he learns really well, and makes a bunch of very solid decisions throughout the game. And there's a level of thoughtfulness and attention to his, like, there's no stage that Robin takes off. There are a lot of players that don't really understand. They're not as great early, they're not as great in the middle, they're not as great late, whatever. Robin actually does know all those things, and he did work at flexibility this set. He did try to push that a little bit, but I agree. It's not his natural comfort zone. I hope he's going to keep working at it, because I love watching Robin play TFT, and he's also just such a great member of the community. So I think this is exactly right for Robin this set, and I think he's certainly capable of being higher in the set 7 rankings, depending on how it goes for him.
Robin typed in chat, bring back armories. I mean, you heard Mortdog a little bit about that in set 7. Guubums shakes his head. All right, this is not a game design and balance discussion, but I think set 7 is going to have some spicy introductions, especially for players like Robin. So well done. Okay, so with that, we are now entering the top 7. This 7th player is the very top of the tier that goes from 7 all the way down to around Souless at 10th. Let's bring him up. It is DQA, Duo Q abuser, Dog Quinn abuser, didn't qualify authentically. Whatever copy pasta you want to spam out there, which I think is a little bit unfair. I mean, DQA, first of all, did qualify very authentically through kind of a Giga Chad way by forfeiting of all times. But now let's talk about his ranking here at 7. I think a lot of people will first say, is he really belonging here at number 7? I want to head over to Guubums first, because he kind of came up at that same crop of players at that same time around you, Andrew. So can you add some commentary as to, does DQA here at 7th make sense? And if not, where should he actually be?
I think it does make sense. I actually think he probably would have made day 2 of Worlds, by the way. Like, I think on the last game, he said he was, like, extremely tired, which, if you know anything about the time zones for NA going into Worlds, that's really believable.
Yeah.
I think he's just, like, a player. I've talked to him, like, really kind of, like, in-depth, starting since from set 4. And I think he's just, like, a player with a lot of potential. I think he put in next to no effort going into Worlds, and I think had he put in more effort, he probably would have also made it to day 2 at the very least. So I think I'm pretty happy putting him at the very least in, like, the top 8, top 9. I personally think I have him at around 7 or 8 or something like that. I think, like, him and Robin were like on those 2 spots. But I do think, like, no matter what, like, however you want to, like, split it, however good or bad you think he is, he for sure high rolled at regionals. I think the fact that he was also willing to play Warwick when no one else really was, I thought was really, really strange. I was expecting to see a lot more Warwick in our regionals. I think him taking advantage of that, despite his low prep, kind of, like, definitely worked to his advantage. And I think that finally, where I will give him a pass, is, like, he just recently gone into university, so, like, obviously that takes, like, a big portion of his time. He's obviously hanging out with new people and stuff like that, doing his classes. So I don't think he's, like, I don't think he has the most free time available to him to kind of, like, play TFT. And I think had he been able to spend more time playing TFT, he would be better. And that's kind of, like, a testament to how well he's doing already, because, like, if he's making top 7 on these lists, then he's obviously doing something right. So,
you know, I think DQA's results is a testament to just his raw ability. Bryce, when you first got coaching from DQA, you actually pointed out 2 people specifically to me. I remember. Actually, no, 3. You pointed out 3 people. You pointed out DQA, you pointed out Guubums, and you pointed out Ine, who no longer is playing TFT. He's going to school, taking care of IRL. So when you see him continue to just kind of, like, have this raw abilities to perform when it matters here, like, what's stopping him from becoming even a better player from this point?
I think it's purely about time allocation. When I point these people out to you, I'm pointing out someone who thinks about the game differently. One of the reasons I love getting coached by so many different TFT players is because it's so fun to just actively talk out loud with them and think about a game collaboratively and understand how they approach a game of TFT. And I think that DQA, and I felt similar about Guubums, is one of the higher skill ceiling players that I've ever interacted with. I think that he does not get enough respect, quite frankly. I think DQA has only been actually in form in TFT one time in his life, and I think it was when he made Worlds. I think when he
Set 4 Worlds.
Set 4 Worlds, correct? Yeah, sorry. when he played at Set 4 Worlds, I think actually at regionals he was just okay, and he had to high roll and he was basically a KO one trick at the time, and he had to get that line consistently, and I think it panned out for him. But the amount of work he put in between, because he was at a phase of life where he actually could invest. Right, he's so young and he's so many different things pulling so many different directions, but he was actually able to learn Slayers and Keepers going into that Worlds, and it was basically those were the 3 main trees, and he learned them all in depth, and he was so good. I was so high on Ramkev going into that Worlds, and I stand by that, but I think that DQA was the second best player we sent to Worlds that year, and I think that the gap was actually after DQA, so I think he was actually pretty close to Ramkev in terms of how good he was.
Oh, I like Sox that Worlds a lot.
I thought Sox was good.
It was Sox and Kurum.
I thought at form at the time, I had Ramkev 1, I had DQA, I had Gap, and then I had Sox, and I had Gap, and I had Kurum at the time in terms of their form going and actually playing at that Worlds. And that's the only time DQA has ever hard prepped for an event. Basically, all these other events, it's not that he doesn't try. He's allocating the time that he can in preparation for Worlds and for regionals and stuff, but he can't give it the time that like Guubums is giving it, for example. And so I think really, really highly of his skill ceiling. I think he gets underrated by a ton of players. I think that people don't put enough respect to this kid's name.
Ramblinnn, is DQA underrated?
I think he's rated right where he should be on this list, at least.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I had him. DQA is not somebody that ever stands out to me as like the most impressive, but he's always there competing. He's always playing well enough to be right there, and making it to Worlds twice. You can't disrespect that. So even if nothing like stands out particularly about him, I really respect him as a player.
All right, and with that, DQA is in the books. Congrats on 7th, Daniel. Very, very nice. Let's move on to our top 6. As soon as I adjust this graphic. That's right, I'm doing it all by myself. Here we go, number 6, and I want to go to Bryce for this. It's Team Liquid's Goose, the artist formerly known as Grand Vice 8. Now, Goose, if you look at just the results from his tournaments, you might think that we're putting a very high emphasis and premium on regionals and worlds. And for Goose to make a very late charge this high up the rankings when I think a month and a half ago, a lot of people wouldn't even put him in the top 10, let alone a top 6. And you've even been a person that's quite vocal, but also talking to Goose a lot on the side. You've watched him a lot. Just start this conversation here. Goose at number 6, first reactions.
Yeah, I'm so happy that Goose is 6 overall, and I am so happy to have eaten my words from the last episode of the show where it was going into regionals, and it was a few days before regionals, and I was talking about my doubts in the fact that I thought that Goose is an insane player and insane potential, but I think he had very, very clear weaknesses in his tournament game historically, and I think the results speak for themselves. I mean, look at his tournament results this set before regionals, and if you look at his tournament results in previous sets, they weren't a whole lot better, and I think it's because he had conditioned himself to play a certain way. He's playing too wide. He's playing the game too well in some ways, right? It's the way that Mortdog wishes everyone played TFT, which is basically slam whatever the game gives you, play whatever units the game gives you, and figure it out. And I think that works really well on ladder, and I think it's a really terrible way to play tournament TFT in general. And even if you look at the distinction between like the flex play that Goose was playing and the flex play that Guubums was playing, there were additional layers to Guubums' flex. He's understanding of how to play around Lost Streak a lot better than Goose. He understands how to slam items and to play around units that scale well and understands kind of how to flip the script, and Goose didn't really have that. But Goose put in an enormous amount of work leading up to regionals, and as he moved up my personal power rankings each basically successive day, similar to Guubums, and it was so fun to see him pop off and to play. Guubums said multiple times that he was basically just playing Sivir. That's not actually true. He played tons of
he wasn't. He was playing Innos, Hextechs, and Strikers.
And he played some Arcanist games. He played Triforce games. It was wider than you're giving him credit for, but it was not, I'll play everything. He had a sense of what was good, and he was willing to play into that style. He was a little bit more thoughtful about when and how he slammed his items. And like Ramblinnn said earlier on the show, his fundamentals in TFT are so good that I think he actually just put enough control around his game to really let his skill shine through. And I was so happy to see him qualify for Worlds, do well at Worlds. I've always loved watching this man play TFT.
Guubums, you look like you're trying to hold back, interrupting Bryce. You're pursing your lip. You're not?
No. But I mean, okay. I'm down to speak, but...
Yeah, go ahead. Talk
about Goose. So obviously like he made Worlds and like I did as well, so I got like a lot of time to kind of talk to him and stuff. I think the thing I respect the most about Goose, honestly, is that like between regionals or even like during regionals and before regionals, all the way leading up to Worlds, he was so open to changing the way he played the game. And I think like that takes a level of like humility to just like step back and think like he's literally one of the top players, right? He's always been one of the top players.
Always.
And for him to say like, okay, look, like it's not working for me, and I'm gonna change the way I play the game, and then for him to do it as well as he did, I think that's like, more than worthy of respect. That being said, I do think like kind of like the ratings on Goose are a little bit really kind of like on the extremes end, at least on the more casual side. I've noticed like a lot of Twitch chatters and like a lot of like, I know we shouldn't really put too much weight on these comments, I guess, but I've noticed like people will either like say he's really good, like super, super, super good, or like say he's really bad. I think like for the most part, I think 6 is exactly where I put him, but I think that's fair. I think like despite him making as far as he did in Worlds, which is to the final lobby, and us actually having a moment in the second day where like we pretty much had to both top 4 to make it in, and like we were both tied, and or it was like something cool like that, and then it was just like 2 and 3, and we ended up getting 2 and 3, and then we both made it in just like by the skin of our teeth, like literally on those last 3 slots we were all tied. But I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I think like having the the incentive of like continually improving as you kind of like go towards Worlds is like really, really good for your like for anybody as like a player. Just like having the the drive to just improve because you are like attending Worlds, I guess, is really, really important. So I don't even know what I'm saying at this point, but I mean, I think he's good. I think like he's not quite on like the super, super high tier of like the Worlds players, in my opinion, at least. I think that being said, that's no slight against him. I think he's certainly one of the best players in NA, at least now. And I want to see like how he refines his style, kind of like moving forward. So
I have a lot to add to it, but it's funny that you said that you're just kind of talking, you're rambling, if you will. Let's head over to Ramblinnn. Add some commentary here on Goose from your perspective here.
So I actually rated Goose very highly going into regionals, and it was just because of how obvious he was of a different player than he was in the past. It was like somebody new. He completely refreshed his game plan. It is like Goose I'd never seen before, and I wouldn't say I'd expected him to make it a Worlds, but I was not surprised at all. It was just, he was peak form to me, and it really delivered on making it. I think his play was a little shakier at Worlds, level of competition a little higher, maybe gets punished harder for mistakes, the line's not as good, not as solid, but I mean, he figured something out, and I was really happy to see him do so well and be able to execute those late games that he couldn't really pull off before, where he'd always bleed out to a 4th. He was getting those top 2s that he couldn't.
Absolutely. Goose enters the new tier of rankings from Goose upwards. It's pretty close up until the final 2, which we'll talk about in a sec here. But Goose definitely got a lot of high marks across the board, namely from someone who just interviewed him, is Ramkev. Ramkev gave him the highest top marks, putting him 3rd, which I think was really cool. All right, so with that, I want to say one last thing is that there's been a lot, as people have mentioned, there's a lot of disrespect going for Goose, but we want to own it as casters, and as casters, we're storytellers. We paint the narrative a lot to the viewers, especially those who don't have intimate knowledge from it. And I just want to say, on top of what Bryce already said, I'm sorry, man. You really proved us wrong. And I think we really, especially the last episode, we took a time to say, this is a moment where he made a mistake, and everybody makes mistakes. I think we were a little bit unfair about that. I think you killed it, and I couldn't be more proud that you were one of the NA representatives, and I think you absolutely killed it, man. I'm so proud of you. And I can't wait to see Set 7, where the new refreshed Goose is about to pop off yet again. And what's scary is that he might be the one improving the most on this list. 2 days after regionals, when he had qualified for Worlds, Goose was VOD reviewing with us in the channel, and he said, wow, VOD reviewing is so great. You can actually spot your mistakes and improve on them. And then my mind was blown. I said, this is the first time you're VOD reviewing and you're this good at TFT? Yeah. Absolutely mind-boggling. This guy has so much more potential. He is nowhere near his ceiling. If this is where he is in his peak form, I can't wait to see him in a set or 2. All right, with that, let's head over to our top 5. The top 5, it starts to get real nitty-gritty. Some of these rankings are very close. But without further ado, let's pull up, maybe for the first time people see his face. It's Setsuko. Setsuko, the first player in North America to hit 2K LP, and was able to try to push for rank 1 and 2 simultaneously. His tournament results, as you can see, a little bit all over the place. Either he's kind of day one or he's pushing that very final lobby, threatening to win. I want to go to Ramblinnn first. We've been going to Guubums and Bryce a lot to start out the conversation. Ramblinnn, let's talk a little bit about Setsuko from your perspective. Why do you think he's ranked so high, despite the fact that he didn't have any definitive win? He didn't have that crazy result at regionals that qualified him for Worlds.
So the first thing I want to point out on this graphic here is that the Innovation Cup can pretty much be thrown out because he had a family emergency and he had to drop out basically on the first day. So I would expect him to do better than that. Maybe not. Maybe he doesn't end up going first, but you definitely wouldn't have gone 31st, so I wouldn't look at that as anything of note. Setsuko is the best ladder player in NA this set, maybe ever, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
It's very obvious. He just dominates the ladder. He dominates players that are weaker than him, and that's a different skill set, which is why it's like you can't rate him at the very top because he's not able to transfer that to tournaments the same way. But when it comes to just going 9 and capping out your board and winning games that other people wouldn't know how to win, he's the best at it, and he's very consistent about it, which is the most impressive thing.
Guubums, you were kind of chiming in there. You said the best. It's not even close. What is it about Setsuko in particular? You talk to him so much.
Oh yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to him nearly as much as I used to. But that being said, like I think like when I watch Setsuko, I alluded to this earlier in the podcast. But like when I watch him, like he does stuff that like I just would never do. And like for me, like when I get to watch stuff like that, like it's kind of like humbling for sure, but it's also like definitely an opportunity for me to improve as well as a player. So when I watch him do stuff and like it pans out like well for him, like as the game progresses, just like as Ramblinnn mentioned, like this guy caps out boards like crazy high. You see the boards this guy comes up with late game, like you're just like you see that shit, it's like you're going first, right? There's no competing against that. And it's like as you guys mentioned, he's for sure the best ladder player. Like he absolutely destroys ladder players. Like you see his scores when he hit 2K. Also, he hits like 1900 more than everyone else combined, by the way. Like 1900 is like a record that pretty much definitely less than 10 people have achieved in NA, and Setsuko has probably achieved it more than 10 times by himself. So it's like you watch this guy on ladder and it's kind of like just different. I don't think his tournament results are, anything to scoff at either. Like 12th at regionals is not like whatever. He didn't make final day, but I mean that's more than good enough for sure. Innovation Cup, as Ramblinnn said, you just throw it out the window. I don't really think there's anything to be said there. I think going into it, he was definitely among the strongest. So the expectation on him was high. And then he obviously has good performances here, and he's had good performances in the previous sets as well, for sure. So I don't think like him being, I think he is worse in tournament for the reason that Ramblinnn said. I think that being said, he's still super, super consistent. And I think there's a lot to learn from watching him play.
I've learned so much. I mean, everything you said is just speaking volumes for me as well. I learned so much from Setsuko's stream. He was a person that went from no face, didn't know his personality, only knew that he dominated ladder and didn't stream at all. Even in tournaments, he didn't even stream his POV. To now, he's a consistent nightly streamer, and now is a person that I feel like I steal all my tech and knowledge from. Whenever I sound really smart, it's because I've like learned these interactions and things from Setsuko. And there has to be something said about the fact that this man plays more TFT than anybody. Just more TFT. Yep. It's off season, and he's still streaming and grinding nonstop. There's something that had to do about that work ethic, Bryce, that feels like it's only a matter of time before Setsuko maybe even tops this list.
Yeah, his potential was absolutely top one. I when he started streaming more at night, it was like the best for me because it's actually like the perfect time for me where I can kind of wind down at the end of the day when my wife wants to be doing her own thing, and I will always watch Setsuko, and I love watching him play TFT. He's the best ladder player by a mile, and the ladder, some of the habits he develops on ladder are weaknesses in tournaments. It has to be said. He's like the better version of Soju. He basically never rolls, and he understands how to build boards that preserve HP early, scale into a board that he can build around to be stable at level 8 and then go 9, and he's always making correct decision after correct decision in order to do that. And so he is just punishing the fact that the players in the lobby are not as good as him and cannot make all of these micro decisions as well as him. It's not that he's a bad tournament player. I just think he's been like forged in the fire of ladder play, and I think that he needs to understand the distinction between ladder and tournaments and find ways to play a little bit differently to get more consistent results in tournaments so that he can. You can't get to 9 as often as you can in a tournament as you can in ladder, right? It's just not possible. And so he needs to understand some of those dynamics and recognize when he's in a situation where he can't play the same way. And oftentimes what I see when he's flaming out in tournament games is that he's missing times that he needs to be rolling earlier, and he winds up on 4-1 with like very small amount of HP relative to what he's used to having. And he's like, shit, I can't go 8 and build the boards I'm used to doing. So then he's rolling on 7. He doesn't actually understand like when he can stop rolling and like how to play around 3-cost units at level 7. So I think there's some clear weaknesses to his tournament play, but his potential is insane. His skill is insane. He's such a good ladder player, and he deserves to be at the spot on this list.
And yet,
yeah, I'd say one last thing is that he was the best Fortune player in set 4 by a wide margin, in my opinion, and he's definitely the best Merc player. Yeah. But I mean, like, I know people will point to Souless for sure, but like, I think he's the best Merc player. And yeah, I don't really think it's arguable. So.
I agree with that, especially if you watch his stream. And yet, despite that, you put him in really competitive fields like this, the first Challenger Series, which was actually quite competitive, and he still performed very well. I think he's putting it together. I think, and he's been on interviews saying that he's trying to shake off this reputation that he's not a tournament player, that he's just a ladder, pub stomper. And I think this set really put him on that map. And I mean, look at it. He's cracked top 5 when I think a lot of people weren't sure where to place him heading into this set. So well done, Setsuko. And I think that's all we're going to say about that. All right, let's go to number 4, shall we? This one is probably the most meteoric rise that we'll see this entire set, and it's one that's been hyped up so much, especially by Bryce, so he's going to go first here. It is SpicyAppies at number 4 with very, very incredible results, and I mean, just 1 point away from potentially even going beyond and going into the top 3. Bryce, talk about the ascent of SpicyAppies this set.
Man, I'm so happy. There's 2 moments on the show that I've been looking forward to. It's this one, and then when we get to Guubums. I'm like,
spoiler alerts.
Well, when we get to Guubums, if you don't think Guubums is in the top 3, once again, I don't know if you've been paying any attention. So, okay, first of all, these scores though, he was so consistently good in every tournament in which he played. He's such an insane player and a tournament player. He's the only player on this list other than Guubums who's a true flex player, in my opinion. Someone who can play loss streak or win streak. Someone who is very creative and fluidly building around different items and boards. The Gnar Chemtech game that he had that we cast, Dan, will go down in history as maybe my favorite TFT game that I've cast ever. I only wish we got to see his board earlier.
It's legendary.
But it was just such a great second place. And look, he was not at this level going into the set. People I was talking about early in the set when I started to see some of his play and say I'm excited about Appies, and people were saying, man, I think it was Nico who said, you're finally going to stop sleeping on You're finally stopping sleeping on Appies. I was like, I don't think I was sleeping on Appies. I just think he's a different player. I think he's gone to school in his own gameplay. He's leaned into his strengths, and he is so good now. And I think he has top 1 potential. I really, really do. I think this was his coming out party, but he's going to have a lot of great TFT tournaments ahead of him. And it also has to be said, what a wonderful human being. What a beacon of positivity in this community. He's always has a smile on his face. He's so supportive of everyone in his chat, of people on their journey of learning the game. He's such a great ambassador, and I just am so happy for him and his success.
Ramblinnn, it's really hard to follow up. I'm pretty sure Bryce hit all the high notes. Can you add a little bit more about SpicyAppies? Is there anything that particularly impresses you about him when you see him play?
Yeah, I talked about how Robin kind of clashed with augments, but if you look at Spicy, it's like the set was custom built for him in his brain. It's exactly what he needs to take advantage of. It's the perfect resources for him, and it really showed this set is that he was coming up with stuff that other people would never even possibly think of, and a lot of it he's probably coming up in that very moment, just during that game, like, yeah, this sounds good to me. I'm gonna make it work, and he does. So I'm not surprised to see him ranked this high, and I'm not surprised to see him do so well consistently out the set. It was definitely a great showing for him.
His results are absolutely bananas. Guubums, he was compared to you in terms of true flex playstyle. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, so after Zon Cup, which we both went first because, like, if you guys know anything about Zon Cup, it's like 15 people go first apparently. So anyway. Yeah, anyway. So I watched after Zon Cup and I was like, holy, like, this guy's really, really good, right? Because Bryce has been singing his praises for a little bit longer than that. Maybe not like, a crazy amount longer, but for sure after watching Zon Cup, I was like, this guy is, for sure. Like, after watching Zon Cup, and I thought I was good at Zon Cup, right? I did well. I had the highest total points. He was second. But I thought he was actually better than me after Zon Cup. I think going Innovation Cup, even though he got first and I got second, I thought I was better. I think I played worse on the last day. I think I could have played in a way that probably got me the first. I was definitely on the higher or the better side of variance. That being said, I think like Appies is crazy good. I think he was better at Zon and better at Inno, at least relatively, than he was at regionals. I watched his regionals play, and mind you, like getting ninth at regionals is no joke. Like he tied for eighth, so it's not like he was really not like whatever. He was tied for eighth, right? So he realistically is on the same tier of like I guess like making on to the next day. And I think had he made it to the next day, he definitely had a shot to make it through. That being said, having watched his regionals, I think he made mistakes that I wasn't the biggest fan of. I actually think that like among the 3 tournaments that I did watch or VOD watch him, I think that was the worst of the 3. So I put him 4th just because I don't really think I can put anyone above the top 3. But I think like he's right there, right? I had him as like the 3.5 kind of almost spot, and I really want to see what he does in the next sets. As Bryce mentioned, like I think for sure, like other than myself and I think Socks sometimes, he's the only true like flex like everything, like full flex, doesn't matter what units, just puts units on his board and just makes do with it. I love that style of play. Obviously,
Socks started that way, but he hasn't been that way for 3 sets.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think like his Sivir.
Woof. 3 sets. He's saying years ago.
I mean, it's true.
It's pretty true. It's pretty
I'm
true.
not criticizing, but
no, you're totally right in terms of like what and he's very public about it. Like, hey, this is just my strategy going into it, and I think that's the best way to execute it. And SpicyAppies feels like he's inherited that mantle. I will say that SpicyAppies enters that tier of players where no one ranked him lower than 4th. This guy clearly had the respect of a lot of players. You could argue that he could definitely make a push to 3rd, which we'll talk about in a moment here, but he was only 3 points behind. That's how close it was for SpicyAppies to crack the podium for the bronze medal. Incredible set. If he was able to just narrowly clutch out that regionals, I'm pretty sure that he would have made top 3. But I'm excited for the ceiling, and I think everything that y'all said was great. So we'll see if SpicyAppies can keep up that momentum. But with that, we now enter the top 3. I can see some predictions about what people are trying to put out. I'm really excited for this top 3 in particular. I think top 3, as we start to enter this conversation, this number 3 won't surprise anybody whatsoever. It's Jeffrey Pan. He's the man. He's also the person ranked at number 3. Now, Milk is quite a conundrum to rank because if you look at his results, how do you put this guy 3rd just from the first 6 tournament results? This guy didn't play TFT, it felt like. And yet, 1st at regionals and an actual threat and contender to win at the World Championship. How is he making 3rd place, Ramblinnn? Why is Milk here at top 3?
Man, everybody talks about how when Milk tries, he's one of the best, and it's absolutely true. I mean, I don't know how much effort he really put into the first half of the set, but it's basically like he didn't play it, so when you look at the regional finals, that's when it matters, and he shows up and he takes 1st. Like you can't disrespect that. He's obviously, like a lot of people are saying, like maybe Guubums was the best player for NA at Worlds, but they would still even possibly put Milk over him for winning it just because he's so good at winning. And the way his style of play, maybe it didn't pan out for him this time, but there's a reason he won regional finals. So I think 3rd is a good ranking for him. A little higher than I had him, but not any complaints from me. I think it's solid.
Guubums, you were even saying Milk was that player that could potentially be better than you at Worlds or do better than you at Worlds. Talk a little bit about Milk here.
Yeah, so I had Milk at 3rd just because I really don't think you could put him lower than that. Like for me specifically, I think there's an argument for Appies for sure. Actually, I think those are like the interchangeable ones maybe. But like I will tell you, after the first day, the 2 players I was most scared of was Hwanmye and Aesah. I don't actually think Hwanmye was that good going into Worlds, but like I think he had the reputation, he had the games, and he also did well just like throughout scrims and all that fun stuff that like pretty much I couldn't really help but having a little bit of that fear. And Aesah for the kind of like the more obvious reason. And I think after those 2, the person I feared the most was actually Milk. In some ways, like I mean, he's my friend. I did a good amount of prep with him going into Worlds. In some ways, I was a little bit relieved to see him knocked out in day 2 because I thought like him being as good as he is. Like he's definitely a threat to take winning the World Championship. I think what I will say is that I think I was probably better than him at Worlds, but I like exactly as you said, I think the chance that he won the World Championship was probably higher than mine. And just like for me, like having a little bit of that fear of him just like winning is one, I think that's like it plays crazily well in his favor. I think like going into any tournament that he's actually like prepared for, he'll always have that a little bit of that aura of like kind of surrounding him, where like you just kind of fear that he's gonna win the entire thing, right?
Yeah, if you run Worlds 10 times, you have the higher AVP, but he has a higher win share.
Right, exactly. So like, that's exactly how I'd view that. So I mean, he's a crazy good player. I think like he perfected Sivir. I watched his regionals and I didn't think he was like that good, but then actually having like learned more about Sivir and like gotten better, I was like, okay, you know what? Like some of the decisions like make a lot more sense. That being said, I still think like obviously he's making mistakes as everybody does, but yeah, for sure. I mean, Milk is just crazy. I mean, and also like we haven't really talked about this in a while, but like in terms of ladder performance, like Milk was, I mean, about as dominant as they really are, as they really come. Obviously, with the exception of Setsuko, because nobody kind of really came close to that. But yeah, he's Milk is just really insane.
Yeah. So Dan, you've been hosting this segment, but I have to jump in and turn this to you because you are good friends with Milk. You talk to him as much as anybody, and I know you know so much about his play. So how do you feel about Milk in this spot?
There's few players who I think can flip the switch like Milk can. I think a lot of players think they can. I think a lot of players say, yeah, I can get into form and I can be on my best and I know how to prep. I know I can do it. I can take a break. I don't think many players in TFT can take a break and stay in top form. And I think Milk is player probably in like maybe two other people at best can possibly do it. And they wouldn't be able to do it as well as he is. It's because Milk is a great and possibly the best tournament player in TFT, period. I think he really understands what it takes to win. If you just look at and break down from a statistics perspective, Milk, I think, has always won a lobby in every day of tournament he's ever played in, which I think is actually quite a crazy stat if you think about it. This man just knows first. Now, of course, he might have more 8th places than your average tournament player, but I mean, that also goes a little bit with the way he thinks, and that alone makes him always a contender, and that's why you see players like, you know, his friends like Soju and Kyun will always put him like number 1 on their list because this man just knows how to win. In terms of what also makes him even scarier is I think this is probably the worst form Milk's ever been in going into a high-stakes competition. I don't think he was very good going into Worlds, which is scary to say because I don't want to flame him that hard, but like he in terms of relative to where he was in other Setsuko, where like he was, you know, in peak form with his other competitive tournaments, Milk didn't even know how to play certain variations of mutants, right? Like you saw him go 8th with a Blade Master Mutant and for some reason decided to try it and he went 8th. The very next day, first game, you saw a Chinese player able to get it first with it. I don't think Milk was in his best form, period.
I thought Milk was really, really scary going to Worlds. Honestly.
I think he's really good at what he was good at, and I just think he wasn't that good at what he wasn't good at. And I think he'd be the first person to tell you. He didn't know what he was doing in certain compositions that he tried at, and that's just not peak Milk. Milk always knows what he's trying to do. When Milk's in peak form, he always knows what he's going to do. He's going to be able to execute it, and he does it better than almost anybody else there in that field.
Precisely.
So I think that Milk here at number 3 is kind of his lowest point. I think that if he's motivated for set 7, he could be number 1. I just don't think he will be.
Oh, you don't think he'll be motivated for set 7?
No.
Oh, wait, do you think that he'll come back at some point down the road, or do you think that like Milk's TFT journey, and not that he'll quit playing or that he won't compete, but do you think he's like run his course like we've seen the peak form we'll see?
It's a bigger discussion in general, but I'm pretty sure the competitive for set 7 has already been set in stone because of the fiscal calendar. You set 2022, not set 6, set 7 competitive. And, you know, I just don't think Milk is motivated by Piltover Cup and Zon Cup and mid-set and Challenger Series. I just don't think he's motivated. And if he's never motivated by this, he's never going to be number 1. He might not even break top 3 at that point because other people will care, and they're going to take it from him.
Well, Milk, I'd be sad if that's true because when you play great TFT, man, it's so good. It's so good to watch.
Is that a league? I don't know. I'm just saying that I'm pretty sure based off of the trends it would be. And again, this is a bigger discussion. I have no clue or no insight, no behind the scenes knowledge of how Set 7 is going to run, but I'm pretty sure it's just going to be kind of similar to what we have with slight improvements, hopefully. And if that's the case, I just don't really see Milk making a charge. But will he be in contention to win regionals? Absolutely. Will he be in contention to potentially go beyond and win the world championship? I think so as well. Oh, wait, I'm the host as well, so I think that's it. Well, we got our top 3 in, and now we move on to the top 2. Now,
when you do it really fast, I have to say, because there's some O-Cage business happening here, right? The 2 guests on the show are finishing 1-2. I would like it on the record that we selected them. Oh, is that what you're going to say?
Spoiler alert! Why do you keep spoiling everything, Bryce? Oh my gosh.
I just think it's important to note that we invited them before we did our rankings. That's all I'm saying.
That's true. We had these episode pegged like basically after regionals finished.
Yeah.
So it was a long time ago, and it just so happened to be that way. But without further ado, the silver medalist number 2, it's Ramblinnn. Now Ramblinnn, I think a lot of people would say you should be number 1. I think that's the first thing a lot of people would say in terms of when they evaluate your raw skill and potential. But I also want to say, as I know it's first on a lot of these graphics, I apologize. Ramblinnn, you put yourself at number 2. So you also have recognized this as well. Can you add a little color and commentary as to, why you think right now you're at number 2?
If we're talking about the entirety of the set, I think I was the better player this set, but I cannot put myself over somebody that made it to Worlds and was so much clearly better at regionals. So I had to put Guubums at 1. That's all it is to it. I don't think that's... I would like, if anybody put me over him, I think that's just wrong. Just because he made it to Worlds and he was the best player at regionals. Like that, what more do you want out of a set?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Very succinct. Now, I want to pass it back to Guubums. Ramblinnn just had a very wholesome moment saying, you were better. Guubums, what do you say to that?
I think like he put it pretty well. Like I think for more of the set, he was certainly better than me. I think at regionals, like I hit my stride. That was the first time if you ever asked me, I would ever say I was ever better than Ramblinnn. So I'm pretty, I think, honest with like how I want to place people. I wouldn't ever say I'm better unless I actually thought I was better. And yeah, I mean, like, even like that being said, I think Ramblinnn actually improved a lot going into LCQ. We all watched him play. We obviously all felt terrible because we definitely wanted him to make it through. But like, I think he played more than well enough to deserve like the spot. I think like, I mean, it's just a tragedy because like it's a tiebreaker on like 15 tiebreakers. And it's just, I mean, I wanted to see him play at Worlds. I think like even thinking selfishly for a second, like the fact that I didn't get to like practice with him nearly as much because he didn't make Worlds probably made like not only just myself worse, but probably the other NA reps worse. I think like even after watching LCQ, I said he's probably a top 5 player in the world. I stand by that. I think like maybe not top, like I mean top 5 is like a little bit iffy now, especially with how good the CM players did, but he's certainly in the conversation. And I think anytime we have like a Worlds and anytime we have like a regionals, Ramblinn's just definitely the threat to just take it over. So
Bryce, when Ramblinnn missed again twice, and Ram, we're going to talk about this a little bit more, so if you want to cover your ears, I understand. I came over to your house, and I was like, dude, I'm about to cry, man. This was just so hard. And yet again, like, in the rankings, I felt like going into everything into region, even after regionals, I was like, Ramblinnn is number 1. It was until Worlds where Guubums really pushed him over the top and went number 1. And yet it feels like he's so close. I don't even have a question here. I'm just passing it back to you. It was a very emotional moment.
Yeah, we were both so sad. We were just like hanging out, bummed out. And my wife was like, what is happening? And we were like,
yeah,
fucking Ramblinn's not playing at Worlds. And she was like, I don't understand what you're talking about, but okay. Look, he was, I think, both of our number 1s heading into the set, right, Dan? I think you rated him number 1 overall. I went on the record after last set when he did not make Worlds, and he was a less well-known player at that time, and I said I thought he was the most underrated TFT player in the world. And I stand by that. And I think that Ramblinnn, he's the most studious player. He's very intentional about the way that he studies the game. He studies everyone. He's very open-minded. He learns all the different styles. He's someone with that. I don't think there's a single player in the world that would not benefit from Ramblinnn reviewing their VODs, because there are a lot of players like Milk, for example. When Milk reviews a VOD, he's like, I would never be in the spot, and like, go next. Okay.
I have a story after this. But go ahead.
And Ramblinnn is like the opposite of that. Ramblinnn understands all of the different stylistic approaches to TFT so well that he can actually give advice as if it's like, okay, from within your style. I'm not gonna impose what I would do on you. I understand what you are trying to do, and I can give you a lot of advice about how you can do what you're trying to accomplish in a game of TFT better than you are currently doing it. And I think that's insane. That is there's a level of like sophistication to the way in which Ramblinnn thinks about a game of TFT that I think is essentially unrivaled. If I had infinite time to play TFT, I would want to play and approach the game like Ramblinnn does. And Ramblinnn, you're gonna fucking get there, man. I played poker for a long time, I've been on the bad side of variance, and you are on the bad side of variance, and it will not last forever. And when you get your shot, I have no doubt that you will capitalize on it because you're a fucking monster.
I sure hope so.
No, I mean he will. Like
You will.
You will.
Yeah.
It's not a matter about
I
that,
have no
you
regrets
will.
with how I played this. I have no regrets with the results, how it worked out. I mean, you can't be too upset about looking at these. On Cup is a wash to me because it's 2 days after a patch, and I can't figure out a patch in 2 days. When that was literally right after they had changed AP Flex from Seraphine Ori. They nerfed that style, and that was the only way I knew how to play the game at the time. So, me, Milk, and Soju all suffered because of that being right after that patch.
Yeah.
A lot of players did. And I think that's why people didn't really factor into it. If you wipe away all the players' worst results, it actually is surprisingly similar to what this ranking actually shapes up to be. But I mean, then Ramblinn's record is just immaculate. It's just clean. There's just nothing they can ever really take away from. If anything, it is kind of leaning more towards the anime arc, right? The protagonist is always so close, and what do they need to do to push beyond? The moment that Ramblinn is able to finally do it, cross that first goal, because there's first of many goals that he wants, which is to probably make the world championship. It's going to be rapture in North American TFT, right? Everyone's going to be so delighted, and it's not going to be one salty soul. I think it's just long overdue. Your time is coming. The last story that I promised to tell is that Milk, right before this show, hit me up. Actually, a couple days ago, he hit me up saying, I'm going to save TFT. And I was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And he showed me, and it turns out that Pokimane had DM'd him inquiring about what builds to play in TFT, because she's kind of, she goes through this random kick like many other people do about like, hey, what should I be, I want to play some TFT. It's pretty fun. It's been a while since I played. Milk's like, I'm going to save TFT because he knew that at this moment that he had an opportunity to get one of the most influential people in the entire gaming industry in order to have an opportunity to help her and improve at the game. And you're talking about, Bryce, the coaching styles of Ramblinn and Milk. And I am sad to report that if you look at Pokimane's profile, she has been led astray by Coach Milk, averaging a 6th place by playing only Sivir. Milk, I don't know how you got her to this point, but fix it. Fix it tomorrow.
Look, I'm down to pivot Ramblinn.
This guy just killed TFT.
I don't care how. Just fix it. Let's talk about number 1, shall we?
Let's
no fanfare, no kind of crazy thing. Let's talk about number 1. It's Guubums here. Precedent is number 0. We have yet to get there, Rambino. Don't you worry. Guubums comes in, the only player in this entire rankings history to be unanimous number 1. He got a perfect score. Rank 1. He averaged a 1.0. Thumbs up from Guubums. He already approves. Let's head over to Bryce. Again, I want to tell the story. Bryce got coaching from a few different players, actually a lot of players in TFT, and he specifically pointed out Guubums to the point where Guubums actually became a good friend of me and Bryce going back into the beginnings of Set 4, and Bryce just said, this guy has so much potential. You have to watch him play. You have to talk to him. And since then, we've been really good friends. Bryce, take it from here.
Yeah, this has been Andrew, I feel like it's not the end of your journey or of our arc, but I feel like this is like kind of a fun moment. I've been really looking forward to it all week long because people don't realize, but we do go way back, right? Like you were one of my first good TFT friends. And I said after my first coaching session, and I don't even know if I ever told you this. Did I ever tell you this? That I said to Dan, I was like, this kid, if he
only
works,
recently, but
okay, yeah. I was like, look, if he works at his game, he's going to be special. He could be among, if not the very best players in North America, because when you get coached by someone, you get into their brain. And what I saw, the way in which I saw your brain working in TFT was at a deeper level. You were understanding positioning and unit interaction and fluidity between the trees and tempo to a certain extent. Although I think that there are a lot of parts of your game that have evolved. You were not, to be clear, you were not there at the time. You were
for sure.
You were a player that like could maybe break into the top 20 if there was the comp that you were one-tricking at the time was really good and you could make it work. And you did that. What I'm talking about, you displayed these skills so deeply on Talon, and then you made like the any item Ari work when people thought Ari was like D tier, and you made Keepers work before anybody, and you pioneered shit like Aatrox and Keepers, like synergyless Aatrox, just because the way in which Aatrox interacted with Keepers and pulling units into cannon, which is something that's so straightforward, but no one was thinking about playing Aatrox on boards. And then you take it a step further, and you're like, actually, sometimes it's correct to backline Aatrox or to play a second Aatrox and put a backline, because that's going to create the cadence you want in the fight. This type of attention to detail is not something that a lot of people are capable of, and seeing you do it and understanding the way in which you approach the game in TFT, I was like, if you keep building on that, he will get there. And so watching your journey this set, going from someone that had been a one-trick, starting to play a little bit more flexibly, and now being able to play truly beautiful, full flex TFT, stylistically flexible, unit flexible, item flexible, AP and AD tree flexible. It has been, I have had so much fun watching you get better and better this set, and I just am so happy for you. You were clearly the best player at regionals. Oh. I think you had a good damn shot at winning worlds if you had gotten a little bit luckier on the final day. And it's been a joy to watch. You're playing some of the best TFT that I've ever seen, period.
Sheesh. I hope they get gassed up by Bryce like that one day. My God. All right. Well, we heard Ramblinnn talk a little about Guubums. Ram, do you want to add anything else, or should we just head to the victory speech with Guubums?
It's pretty hard to follow up after that, so congrats, Guubums. I'm happy for you. I'm glad you both made it to Worlds and had a good showing. You clearly deserved your success this set. So.
All right. With that,
keep it coming next set.
Acceptance speech, Guubums, number 1 from set 6.
Oh, I don't know. I don't have a speech, but I mean, I'm happy to be up here for sure. Soju told me, because like Soju's normally on the panel, he told me, like if he was on, he wouldn't rank me number 1, he'd rank Milk number 1. And I want to say, like, okay, I don't think I'm the most humble person, but like I'm pretty realistic. Like the only reason why I would ever say I'm the best is only because I believe it, right? But I also don't think I would always believe I'm the best. So like if people ranked Ramblinnn or Milk or even SpicyAppies like above me, or even Setsuko actually above me, I wouldn't take offense to it. Would I agree with you? Like currently, I would say no, but I think like it's more. You can definitely argue a case for it, right? So I mean, I'm happy to be up here. I mean, I'm especially happy to be unanimous, but yeah. I mean, it's
we might never get that again. I mean, who knows, right? How it's all gonna play out, but unanimous.
No, next time when we win Worlds.
Yeah. You're right. Good. True. Agree.
Yeah.
All right.
But okay. As for like the analytical stuff, like I've always described myself as I think playing the game, I'm not actually like that good, but like I get a lot of advantages like outside of the game. Like I'll come up with like cool ways to like just push, as you guys mentioned, like unit interactions and stuff like that, and like positioning even and stuff like that. So I get like a lot of advantages that way, and I think like when it does click for me, obviously I do a lot better. If you look at the results, the 9th at Piltover Cup is fake because like once again like infinite people get like the same ranking, so like that's actually a 3rd. So like I was pretty happy with my tourney performances this set. Mid set, okay, the one thing I will say is like for mid set was right after I finished doing really well at Zon Cup, and I felt really strong going into Zon Cup. But mid set, like I just didn't prep that well for it. Me, Bird, and Spencer were like kind of prepping, but then like pretty much like each and every day be like, all right, we'll prep tomorrow, and then we just like play a different game that day, and then like pretty much we didn't end up actually getting there. But what ended up happening was like I got day 1, and as I mentioned earlier, like watching day 2 was like, if you guys know that SpongeBob meme where it's just like Squidward like in his own house, just watching Patrick and SpongeBob like playing outside, like that's what it was like watching mid set for me. Like, it felt so bad. I didn't think the level I didn't think like people playing were like playing like super well either. So it just felt like if I had prepped better, like I'd be able to compete with them, right? And for me, it's like I just feel like I'm not always like that good. I'm not actually, in fact, most of the time I'm not even good at all. But what I feel like I can do is I can prep well, and if I'm well prepped for a tournament and I do poorly, then that's on me. But if I'm not prepped at all, if I prepped well and I do poorly in a tournament, like that might be like variance or something. But if I'm not prepped well and I do poorly at a tournament, like that's completely on me. Like I'm not gonna blame augments. I'm not gonna blame variance. I'm not gonna blame balancing. Like obviously I'll be frustrated about that like in the moment for sure. But I think no matter what, it's like the onus is on me to be prepared for a tournament. So that's kind of like my approach to this whole thing.
Well, there you go. You have the insight into the mind of Guubums, who finished number 1. Congratulations to everybody on this list. You know, we had people in chat who were stopping by. One of my favorite things about this podcast is pretty much everybody on this list is like was here in chat at one point talking about things, saying like, wait, I can't believe I got this high. Oh, I can't believe Souless outplaced me. You know, this kind of fun dynamic. Where's Prestovit? Wait till set 7, okay? We'll see whether or not P-Guy can pop off and fulfill that prophecy. The POK believers will rise up once again. I'm super happy with this. And because of that, I feel like we're going to cut this next segment reportable. I just don't think we have enough time. We've been going long. And these final speeches really had it all. So we're going to go straight into the final stage of this, which is the announcement. And want to say that there's still one tournament left. That's right, we're going to have NA versus EU, a shot at redemption for some EU bragging rights after their performance at the World Championship. It's Mortdog Madness. It's a 4v4 tournament with a 10,000 prize pool that's happening at the end of next week. So make sure you catch that. It's going to be hosted by Giant Slayer TV, and I know I'll be watching. It'll be a really good time.
You want to hear a joke?
Yes.
EU TFT.
Thanks.
They're all asleep. They're not here to listen to the podcast in real time. They're just going to have to watch it on VODs. Crickets. Okay, with that, let's get some final words from the panel before we wrap up the show. I mean, we kind of had some final words from the TFT perspective, but just from the person themselves. We take a step back from, Ram. We talked to Nick from Guubums. We talked to Andrew. Let's get some final thoughts and wrap this up before we kick it off into the set 7 waiting room. Let's start off with Guubums.
Okay, yeah, I realized I should have said this like during the other one, but I want to thank like a lot of people. I can't shout out everyone, but like I think a lot of people know who they are. Like I practice with, you three amongst others, like for sure have spent a ton of time with me, helping me get better at TFT and otherwise. So shout outs to you guys for sure. Like there's like I didn't do this alone, right? Like I think something I'm really appreciative of in the TFT community is that like all the top players, pretty much all the personalities, like there's no drama between us. For the most part, I'd say, but like, a lot of us are really good friends. We talk to each other like pretty much on a daily basis, and oftentimes it's not even like TFT related, right? So I think like there's pretty much no other like community that I've been a part of that kind of like replicates that same thing. There's always like something here or there, like whatever have you. And I think like a lot of that even might have to do with like Mort, right? Like we get such a close face to face almost like with Mort, the lead game designer, that like I don't know, it's just a really good, and I don't know, it's like a really healthy community to be part of, and I'm really appreciative of it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Healthy community, love it. It's so great. Ramblinnn, you talk about this a lot. Final words, thoughts?
Well, Guubums covered the community side of it. They're pretty awesome. There's nothing to complain about there. They got great memes. They got great emotes. What's not to like? I want to give a special shout out to you guys though, both for this show. I think it's an awesome idea. I'm glad you guys were able to deliver on it and make it a thing. You're still kind of figuring out the kinks, but I think I definitely consider it a success. I look forward to listening and watching it every time. As many we've had so far. So hopefully you're able to keep strong with it in the future, and not even just that, as casters, as analysts, and as community figures, you guys are really important for the passion that you offer that not everybody is able to bring themselves and kind of push things forward. So having people like you and Gangly in the community to drive that content is really important, just as it is to have devs like Mort that are involved all the same. So I appreciate you guys.
Oh, woohoo! We're going to always have at least one viewer for the show is Ramblinnn. All right, Bryce, send us home.
Yeah, I think I just want to build on what Ramblinnn was just talking about, actually, which is this show started with an idea. Dan and I are like the nerdiest TFT nerds that ever did TFT nerd. We talk about the game 24/7. We think about it 24/7, and we love to just go deep into the distinction between players, the distinction between tournament play and ladder play, and the meta evolution, and looking at the different regions and all the different things that make TFT so special as a game. And I just want to thank you all for showing up each and every time. We've had viewership that I think far exceeded our expectations for this show, if I'm being honest. I mean, when we planned out the show and we talked about what we want to do with the report cards and going deep into the rankings, it was like, okay, what is the addressable market for this? Like, what is the maximum number of people that could possibly care?
The 10 commenters on Reddit.
Yeah, it was like so esoteric, right? Like when my friends are, you launched a podcast, can I listen? I'm like, don't listen. This is like, you will understand 20% of the words that come out of our mouth. And we just go so deep. And I just want to appreciate everyone for kind of sharing our passion for this beautiful, beautiful game that Mortdog and the whole TFT team have created. It is so special. It's my favorite video game ever. And I appreciate you all wanting to kind of truly deep dive on the North American competitive scene with us, because I love every second of this show every single time we do it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been awesome. It's been real. The next time we're going to have this episode is right after Set 7 launch, which is coming very soon. That's all we have to say. So from Frodan, Bryce, Ramblinnn Guubums, this has been Don't Talk If You Don't Know, episode number 5. And we'll see you next time for more TFT action. Peace.